Welcome back to IO Nintendo, a podcast dedicated to talking about everything Nintendo, at least the fun things anyway. It's been a while since we had our last podcast episode. I believe it was like at the beginning of 2024, and we just kind of laid down a prediction roadmap of what we thought the year would present itself. We were completely wrong. We thought the Nintendo Switch was coming out. We thought we were getting Kid Icarus and a bunch of other things, but hey, you can't always be right, and that's the whole point behind a prediction. But before we get into the topics at hand, Zach, welcome back. What have you been up to?
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm staying busy with life, but that hasn't slowed down my gaming, and excited to be back and talk about not only last year, but what the future has in store for us as Nintendo fans.
Absolutely. So before we get into, I know the topic everybody wants to hear us discuss, the Nintendo Switch 2, let's do a little quick recap of 2024 and just what we overall thought of the year. So 2024, it gave us a pretty decent amount of releases. I was thinking that we were just going to get a lot of remasters until the Nintendo Switch 2 came out, but we actually got quite a bit of interesting titles from their catalog. So I'm just going to go through the list here and let me know what you thought of either one or two of the games, some of the standout games, maybe a game you thought was kind of or just whatever. So we started the year off with Another Code, followed by Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Princess Peach Showtime, Endless Ocean Luminous, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remastered, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Emio The Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club, my game of the year, Nintendo World Champions NES Edition, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership, and Super Mario Party Jamboree, as well as Fitness Boxing. Overall, not a bad year for a transitionary year as well.
No, I'm completely agree with you. Starting off with, I think, Another Code was a great way to set the tone for the year. And I know that it's not a traditional pick, and it's not something that most Nintendo fans would immediately go to when trying to think of something from the back catalog. But that spirit, I think, is what was really needed for this sort of transitionary year. And I didn't get to finish the second game, but I loved my time with the remake of Trace Memory or Another Code, and played a bit of the second game. And it was just a really, really nice way to start off this year, playing sort of a genre that I've kind of struggled with. And I know that visual novels aren't necessarily your go-to either, but I think this year really proved to us that when Nintendo sort of doing something a bit different or going back and like reflecting on their old catalog, especially with Emio, that they have, I don't know, it's surprising how deep those experiences were, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Another Code was something I beat the first game as well. I thought it was a really fun puzzle, kind of mystery / visual novel game that I really enjoyed. I thought the character Ashley was really fun. The whole exploring the mansion and just how much it opens up and how much you learn from the story and like all the murder, I thought that was really good. But Emio, the Smiling Man, I made a whole video based on that game because that game just left such an impression on me. I thought that was a very good game, one of the best stories I've experienced in a game. Did you ever end up beating that game yet or no?
I'm in chapter 9, so
Okay.
I'm right at the peak where like all of the sort of mysteries are starting to kind of come together. But I am, based off of your review, which I recommend everybody go and check out, I immediately understood like what captivated you so much about it. And it's, I don't want to say it's like it starts as sort of like a simple mystery, because it doesn't, but it follows like those typical sort of detective things of, okay, like let's go ahead and look into the crime scene, and then we just kind of slowly start to expand upon what this story is. But the thing that's different about this game compared to a lot of other mystery visual novel games that I've played is how much it spends time with the characters, and even like characters that are sort of ancillary, like secondary to the story. You spend a lot of time with them, and the dialogue options give you this really deep experience with them for things that have like really no larger meaning to the story. So like one, for example, is there's a large, or there's a head of the police department, this detective, and he sort of has a cold. And if you just ask certain questions or make certain observations, he'll just sneeze. And then for the rest of the conversation that you have with him, he just has like snot on his face. And it's just funny. Like it just, it like completely took me off guard because I was like, I did not know that that would be like the sort of balancing of tone that this game would be able to accomplish, because it is serious in its subject matter and it deals with a lot of heavier topics that I think most Nintendo games, even the more story focused, tend to stay away from. But this balance of how relatable and personable these characters are, and also I think the translation, the localization, excuse me, did an excellent job of translating some of the more colloquial Japanese stuff into English. One, for example, that struck a chord with me, and it's pretty simple, but the police department kind of refers to the protagonist as Tante-kun, and kun is just kind of like a suffix that like that is another way of saying like son or different things like for Mister or how they greet people, and they translate it as boy detective, and so it gives that sort of
Oh, I guess I never
flavor.
picked up on that. Interesting.
Yeah, and so like it's a kind of like a cheeky way that they're sort of referring to him, but that translation, it's not one to one, but like tonally it captures that sort of little ribbing that they're doing with him,
Yeah.
and and like the protagonist reacts like in these like sort of embarrassed ways, and so it really gives this like story more depth. But I wanted to ask you, and without spoilers, of course, um, is was that like a standout to you, or what in particular sort of kept you going? Because I know you beat it in like a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah. It was, to me, it was the overall mystery and the story behind it. And like you said, it's very tonally all over the place, and which is something I'm really happy about, because that even reminded me of my favorite game of this entire generation, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. One of the major, I guess you could say, one of the complaints in comparison to number one was that one was very kind of consistent in its tone. It was more of a tragic story trying to get, figure out this story about, yeah, I won't spoil too much, but just trying to go to the end of the world to try to take down the enemy while also trying to avenge your friend. Whereas this game, it was tonally all over the place. While yes, it was a story that dealt with, murder. There were themes of, not to give too much away, but there was, themes about like killing yourself and doing all this type of things, mental abuse. There was also a lot of hilarious moments in this game that legitimately like had me doing a little chuckle or something. Like the back and forth between the teacher and the boy detectives, I thought those were hilarious as they're competing for their love between the what was her name, Ayumi?
Yeah, Ayumi
Hilarious.
Chan. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
No,
really enjoyed
100%. That was so funny.
yeah, I enjoyed stuff like that. I enjoyed things like just hanging out with the other characters and seeing what their personalities were like. And at the end of the game, how every little detail that you experienced in that game, even if you thought it didn't matter, actually brings itself to the forefront by the end of it all. And I think they wrapped it up in a beautiful way. I can't wait for you to finish this prologue, because it really just takes this game from like a A tier game to just a whole nother level. It's very good.
Oh man, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, I definitely things are kind of settling down for me, so I'm really hoping to make a dent into some of the games I didn't get a chance to finish last year. But one other thing that just came to mind when you were just talking about like the little things this game does. Early on, the character's given a cell phone, and it doesn't really serve like a large mechanical purpose. It has certain times where like the story will initiate and say, "Hey, I should call this other character to kind of just recap what we've investigated." But there are a few options that if you're just in the middle of a story beat and you just pull it up, you can make different calls, and so you can find different numbers throughout, and so you can call like restaurants, or you can call the detective agency that you work for and leave like joke messages, and it has no broader purpose to the story, but that level of immersion is something that I think a lot of games are trying to go for, but really lack. And I think because this game's so focused and it understands exactly what kind of story it wants to tell, it can do those funny moments, just like what you were mentioning with like the competition of love between these two characters, which
Yeah.
and like they play that out over a couple of chapters, and like that teacher is hilarious. I mean, the man, he's just constantly like acting like suspicious, but that it's like ends up being something a little bit more earnest. And so it is just it really surprised me how deep they went with this title, especially that it's a brand new entry into a game from the late 80s, early 90s. And it kind of gave me some confidence and some hope for the future of Nintendo, and that they are still willing to take risks, and they can sort of buffer out some of their larger titles to pave the way for smaller games like this. And I don't mean smaller in a sense of scope or meaning. It's just that it's, the animation's beautiful, but it's
It's very
very
deep
much more
cut as far as like
correct.
their
Yeah.
catalog goes. Like another Code and Emio in the same year is very unusual to put it
Yes.
to put a word on it.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, perfectly. Yeah, that describes it exactly. And I did want to also just shout out Princess Peach Showtime a little bit, because we were just talking about unusual and just sort of having a unique kind of spin on something. I wouldn't say it was a perfect game. It definitely had some performance issues.
Mm-hmm.
But each of those individual transformations that Peach um, had unique animations. Each of the worlds felt very well crafted. I thought the variety was excellent, and I mean, Good Feel usually does an excellent job. And like they also recently released Bakiru, which I know you and I are both,
Absolutely.
fans of as well. And there's just a level of dedication that they have to charm that really just kind of kept me motivated throughout that whole entire game. And I hope that um, both Bakiru and Princess Peach Showtime, I don't know what the sales are. I imagine they're not phenomenal, but I do really hope that into Switch 2 that Good Feel gets a bigger budget and continues their partnership with Nintendo, because I personally just really enjoy the out there ideas that they bring to all of Nintendo's platforms. I mean, since what, the Wii era, about with like Epic Yarn and the continuing the Yoshi
The
games.
Yoshi. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I just it has a lot, those their games do Nintendo properties justice, in my opinion. But how did you feel about Princess Peach Showtime? Because I know you got through it as well, right?
Yeah, no, I actually really enjoyed that game. That was a very pleasant surprise for me when I was coming into it, because I remember the very first time Nintendo revealed that game, and I was just like, it was just very casual when they were like, yeah, a Peach game is in development. See ya when it's time to show you some more stuff. And I was kind of just like, eh. But then the more like the game actually came out and I got a chance to play it, I instantly liked it. I thought it was so, you know that I am one of the only people on planet Earth that like Balan Wonderworld. It had elements from Ape Escape 3 and Balan Wonderworld that I really liked, as far as how the character would change within these worlds, the enemy designs would change within the world, the whole landscape of the area would totally change, even like the whole gimmicks and things that they would implement within the worlds, like the ice skating, how the gameplay would be a lot slower instead of just your traditional action platforming with Princess Peach. Whenever you were in detective mode and you were scanning all little types of things that just looked suspicious, and how it would further move along within the level, I thought all that stuff was really good. It's definitely a game a lot of people aren't going to give a try, just because, it's Princess Peach, and, a lot of people kind of attach their masculinity to certain games that they're willing to play. But this game was a very pleasant delight for the spring of the year.
Yeah, no, and I'm right on with you. Like I was just laughing to myself when you brought up the figure skating one, because that was a
Yeah.
huge one that made an impact on me. Because it's just a small thing, and like the industry is, and we'll talk about this later. It's kind of that closing topic of like
Mm-hmm.
where we see this sort of industry going past this year and further on. But the attention to detail that they put in just like those figure skating mechanics, where you're not really, controlling her in a dramatic way, but each directional button she'd have a different skating animation. And I'm just like, this is awesome. And what other game has this? Like there is no other game that would be willing to spend the time to just add these little flourishes to further immerse you into these little small stages. And I'm 100% with you. We're right in the same line there. Just it was a pleasant surprise, and I had a really fun time with it.
Oh yeah, even the cashier laughed at me. I walked up in there with like one copy of Princess Peach Showtime, but she kind of just looked at me and just gave it to me anyway.
Yeah.
But man, when I brought that game home, I was having a blast with it.
I've been having that conversation. I remember with a Captain Toad treasure tracker, and they're like, "Oh, this is for your kid, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's for me, but but I'm gonna love it all the same." But no, I was I guess, was there another standout from that list? I got a couple that I think that stayed with me, but were there any others that you got to on that list?
No, I think I pretty much covered all the games that really had an impact on me, which was Another Code 1, especially Emio the Smiling Man and Princess Peach Showtime. I did actually beat Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door for the first time. I know you and I were talking about that earlier this year. I thought it was a pretty good game. I don't think it's this masterclass RPG like a lot of people put it on this pedestal to be, but I thought it was a very pleasant summer RPG to just kick back and play in portable mode while I was out of town. Really good game.
I think it's earned its title for good reason, and I think especially in the climate or just the market that was around the time of its original release, it did stand out. But you and I are in the same wavelength where I think the good things that series has continued to do have been in the shadow of Thousand Year Door, I think, unfairly. And
agreed.
Origami King is a fantastic game. I personally had, aside from a few quirks with the battle mechanic, I found just the exploration and the time that I spent in that world was just far more engaging personally. I think there's a lot of environmental puzzles in Thousand Year Door that are really grating and just aren't really intuitive, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's a bad game in any means or stretch of the imagination, but I do wish that Nintendo had spaced these out a bit. And I understand because, Switch 2 is coming up, but having Mario RPG Remake last year, then Thousand Year Door, and then Brothership, I think it just sort of ate into each other a little bit. And unfortunately, because of the fanfare for Thousand Year Door, I think it may have hurt the other two games a little bit, but it seems that Super Mario RPG sold pretty well, so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Oh, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say I'm kind of with you as far as the good that the other Paper Mario games do, kind of getting overshadowed by this game in 64. Like, I think there are amazing things that Thousand Year Door does. I think it does great character designs. I think it does great storytelling for all of its characters. And I think the battle system and like the RPG elements, while very light, is something I would prefer over the more puzzle-based combat system of Origami King. But at the same time, I think Origami King did environments phenomenally. I thought they had the best boss fights within the series, and I thought it did characters good as well, even though they were all just like toads and bombs and all
I have like probably 20 screenshots from that game of all of like the hilarious things that the toads were saying, just these completely out there fun dialogue captions. And I understand that like in the larger story the writing's probably a bit better in Thousand Year Door. I would agree with that, but it felt like I just kind of moved from area to area in Thousand Year Door. And that's, again, it's a GameCube game. They were still kind of figuring out the formula for that series. But I 100% agree with you that it was my favorite aspect of Origami King.
Yeah. But I know Echoes of Wisdom, I'm guessing that was your game of the year. You had a lot of high praises for that game, right?
That would be that is actually, it's in my top three. Um,
Oh, okay.
so unfortunately, Capcom just blew me out of the water with Kunitsugami as sort of my
Mm.
game of the year. For that was, I can't wait for Switch 2 to hopefully get that game, because I think a lot of Nintendo gamers are gonna really like connect with it. Not necessarily in its aesthetics completely, but it has a level of attention and to detail and variety from a mechanic standpoint that I think a lot of Nintendo gamers are a lot more open to versus the other two platforms. And it didn't perform very well, so I'm hoping that Capcom is willing to take another chance on it. But so if that does come out, I will definitely be talking about that more in the future
With the physical
with the
release.
physical release, of course. Which will I definitely have questions about when we talk about the Switch too. Um, but Echoes of Wisdom is, I didn't think it nailed the landing perfectly. I won't get into spoilers with it. I think there's a decision that's made about sort of what's causing this issue that felt a bit underdeveloped for me personally. And it's not like necessarily in the story sense, but more that the strength of that game is you going around and helping people. And it's an approach to a Zelda game that seems like, oh, well, that's what all the Zelda games do, but they really don't. Like Link just kind of accidentally helps a lot of people, or you're doing sort of like fetch quests. And because Zelda is more of a character, Link's name literally means the link between the player and the avatar in the game. Zelda is more defined, and Tri, who is this um, little creature that connects to the broader story and can speak for her. So similarly to how like Navi was in the other games, but people see Tri because of the different elements that are happening where they're getting sucked into this other dimension, and um, that way there is more of a chance for individual NPCs to kind of have a relationship with Zelda, especially as the story goes on, and the initial circumstances of there's kind of a suspicion that she's evil is sort of lifted, and the rest of the game opens up, and you really feel like you're in Hyrule in a completely different way. And I think that's been overshadowed a bit because of people's gripes with the echo mechanic, which I thought was fantastic. I understand why people don't like being in menus. It wasn't that annoying for me personally, but it's not necessarily intuitive. You do get this large amount of echoes that you just find, and you have to just use like kind of the D-pad and just filter through them. And there is different sort options, but I understand why that might be cumbersome to some people. But the fun of experimenting with these tools and seeing the different takes of on the Zelda lore, especially if you're a fan, and having them combined sort of the 3D and 2D worlds more in this game than they've ever done before. There's just a lot of unique and I would say bold. I'll say it, bold chances taken on this game that I don't think that you could see in a regular Zelda game, and that leads to another critique that I've heard from people is like, well, they just wish they were playing with a sword, and I'm like, well, that's every other Zelda game. Why you can do that? There is a aspect of this game that allows you to use a sword, but the whole opportunity that this game presents is to approach this series from a different light and have a character that is utilizing wisdom, which is her aspect of the Triforce. And so the echo mechanic not only allows for more experimentation with puzzles, but it also allows for more experimentation with combat. And so I'm really looking forward to, hopefully in the future, them continuing to do more experimental games with the Zelda formula. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I don't know what their sort of internal metrics are on Echoes of Wisdom, but even if it's a one-off, I think it's a very special experience that any fan should play. But I know that, and I know you spent a little bit of time with it, but I did want to ask you, because we've had conversations before where there's kind of this weird, like, everybody just blank slate. Everybody just forgot what it was like living between Wind Waker and Breath of the Wild, and all fans did was complain online about how samey Zelda had been. And
Oh my god, the same old rehashed Zelda. When are they gonna do something new? Yeah, I was there for that.
exactly. And we have like, oh, it's never been good since Link to the Past, or
Yeah.
it's just, it's so just, I'm just so over it. And so I fully embrace this, flaws and all. I would say it's probably my number 3 game of the year. And I'm
What's number 2, just out of
so
curiosity?
I don't have like a full set, but I would say my number 2 is probably Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, because when I think about, that was another early release, so right around the same time as another.
Yeah, right around another
Yep,
code.
right around another code, and the game expands in such an interesting way that even though like my time away from it like has made me forget some aspects of it, I keep going back to it in my head of just like these key standout moments about how it handled exploration, how it handled combat, and it just keeps surprising me the more and more I think about it. And it's a bit, I don't want to say it's too long. A lot of Ubisoft games do kind of overstay their welcome. But I think it changes things up enough that I didn't ever feel like it was wasting my time, which is, I think, really important for a Metroidvania because there's so many of them now. And they fundamentally don't understand that the exploration isn't just the only mechanic that you should have. Like, it should be meaningful. So, and like, I think, games do this well in that even though they have like limited upgrades in terms of like, it's just either like a brand new various suit upgrade, or like just a missile unlock, or just making something slightly more powerful, that has meaningful use in how you continue on and progress in those games. And in Prince of Persia, it does the same thing, but it adds it to combat as well. And so you can have completely different builds that make challenging combat scenarios uh, dramatically different once you get like a new upgrade, or once you kind of change the way that you're approaching combat. And uh, there are shonen level like parry things that really remind me of, and I think they were definitely inspired by Metroid Dread, where like, like in some of those boss battles, you would if you hit that like a kind of a quick time event in the right order or whatever, you would get these long animations
Yep.
that were just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And Prince of Persia, especially as you go on, some of those boss battles have like full on anime level, shonen level, uh, awesome parries and attacks from the villains, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so it really surprised me how much they were able to do in a 2D space, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I
Yeah, go
was.
ahead.
Oh no, I was like immediately when you boot the game up, I was surprised by just how cinematic it
Hmm.
was, even for like a 2D game.
Yes.
Like it's constantly throwing you in from cutscene to different camera perspectives back into the gameplay. I'm like, whoa, this is very good. Even like the characters when you meet them when you're in the temple or whatever, I thought that was a very cool, uh, addition to the
Yeah.
game.
Oh no. And that just keeps growing and growing, and the environments change, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that gets a little daunting. But no, you picked up on something that I think they carry out very well throughout the game, and it's just kind of a shame that that studio has now been dissolved. Ubisoft may be getting purchased by Tencent or something. I don't know. There's just a bunch of stuff that is unfortunate for a release like that. And I understand people's hesitation, um, but I think it was more than worth the price point. If you have any interest at all in kinetic combat, if you like character action games, if you like Metroidvanias, you will enjoy your time with it. And I'm looking forward to it's pretty cheap. Eventually picking up the DLC and then maybe jumping back into it this year or at some time, because I just, the more, as I mentioned earlier, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I kind of appreciate how well designed it was.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't play too much of it. Like I said, I only played about like the first two chapters or so, and then I think I went to start my Xenosaga trilogy playthrough after that. But I did enjoy what little I played from it, and from everybody that I trust, people that are diehard Metroid fans, they say this game is up there with Metroid Dread, and Metroid Dread is it's a game I don't think has any flaws and would probably be a perfect 10
Mm-hmm.
in my book if I was somebody that did the number scoring system. That game to me is a game that will be one of the ones that define the Nintendo Switch, and is probably the best Metroid game I've ever played. Matter of fact, I think it's a Nintendo all-time great. That game was just phenomenal, and they did a great job characterizing Samus and making her really this cool
Mm-hmm.
character that I was kind of always just like, all right, it's just Samus. It's a new Metroid game. But that game really held like a special place in my heart when it came out. That game and Monster Hunter Rise, phenomenal.
I definitely want to. I need to give Monster Hunter Rise a chance, because that is a series that I've just tried over and over and over again to get into. But the sort of the what is the zip line, or like the sort of lasso mechanic that's in Rise?
Yeah.
That, I mean, that
Hmm.
speaks to me much more from like a sort of movement focused gamer, and I definitely want to try that out. But I 100% agree with you on Dread. I To me, I think the only thing that was maybe I wished was a bit different was that I think there were just too many missile upgrades, and it would have been cool maybe to have um, some take something, I guess, from the Prime series and have maybe some lore collectibles, or maybe like if you did certain things you would get some art unlocked or whatever. But that's so
Yeah.
minor, because I'm with you. I can't even think of really a flaw of that game. It was just designed so well, and I'm hopeful that Mercury Steam continues their partnership with Nintendo, and not only do we get Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, but perhaps something more in that 2D space.
I agree. I agree. Well, that was Nintendo's 2024. They also did two interesting things near the end of the year. The one of them was the Nintendo Switch Alarmo, some type of Nintendo Switch alarm clock, to where if you move your body, you'll start to hear sound effects within a video game series. And then they also did Nintendo Music, which was a streaming app for Nintendo Switch Online users, to where you got access to some of their soundtracks and you could stream them on the.
I noted that as well in my prep for the show. The music is just is such a neat way of Nintendo sort of remedying their copyright protections, and not really wanting to trust other streaming platforms. And whatever, it's another app. I understand maybe that's not what people want, but one thing I remember pointing out to you, and it's a very small touch, but based off of like the name that you use on your profile for like the Brain Age music, it like would write your name inside of like the images.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, it's
cool.
cool, and there's a level of interactivity that I hope they continue to like expand upon. One, I guess my only real complaint is that when you click on the game, it doesn't give you the full soundtrack. It will just give you like a kind of like a snapshot of it, and then you have to go down and then like click on something to get the full album. But like I'm surprised that they're even including like some of like the little sound effects or jingles for some of the games, and just it's just this really nice thing that whenever a new game's released, even if I only listen to like 4 or 5 tracks, um I'm able to kind of just pop in and hear things, and I know that aren't really promoted. I know that you were psyched about Wave Ray 64 and a few of the others. I mean, it's just really neat that I hope that they continue to expand upon it.
Yeah, it seems like they're doing weekly updates. I believe we just had Wind
I
Waker
think so.
made its way to the
Yeah.
service. Really cool addition. So we got Wave Ray 64, one of my all-time favorites. Now we just need the Xenoblade series. I don't know why that's still not on there. I get why it's still not on there, but it's one of my all-time favorites. I can listen to it at any time. But Splatoon is the one I've listened to its entire soundtrack on there. Wii Sports, really great trip now down nostalgic lane, and Wave Race, like I said. I'll probably give Mario 64 a chance just while I'm driving to work or something. But overall, I thought the addition to the Nintendo Switch music app was really cool, and it came at no extra cost too, so there's no real reason for me to complain about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're one of the only ones that can probably do that, just because they have such a wide catalog of music that they actually spent time crafting to try to make it as memorable as they can. And you know me, like one of the main things I look for in a video game when everybody's out here, who cares about the music in games, bro? Like, I'm just here about the graphics, I'm here about the performance, I'm here about the gameplay. Like, music is something I take very seriously whenever I'm reviewing a game or just listening or playing a game.
It makes or breaks a game, like for me too. And I mean, I can get past it in some respects, but like just real just offhand about this is on NSO. I was kind of killing some time throughout the holidays, and so there's an old beat 'em up for Super Nintendo called Peacekeepers. I'd been just kind of interested in trying it out. It's not a great game, but they make this wild decision that by default it's just sound effects and background noise. There's no soundtrack, so you have to go into the options and then turn on the soundtrack.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know what they were going for. Perhaps it was like this, but it's literally like you're just beating up guys and you're just like ooh, ooh, and that's it. And then yeah, exactly, and then there's like a wind sound effect or some weird factory sound going over and over and over again, and I'm like, this is driving me crazy. And so I looked it up, and so I looked it up, and luckily you can turn it on. And so I accidentally backed out of it without saving my progress. So if I ever so choose, I can go back and play it again. But no, music is king. It can make or break some games, and yeah, it's incredibly important. It's up there with all of those other categories you mentioned.
Absolutely. Nintendo's just using their strengths to make their service more appealing. There's only a couple of video game publishers that I think could truly get away with this, and it would be like Sega, maybe Square Enix, and Nintendo. They think they're probably the only ones that could truly get away with a video game streaming service like that. But unless you had anything else from 2024 that you wanted to talk about, we'll go ahead and move on to Switch 2.
No, I mean, yeah, I think I'm ready to talk about Switch 2 and 2024. I think while maybe not has necessarily a classic game for the mainstream, for gamers like you and me, or those who are willing to take chances, it was a whole year of just solid releases. And if you have any interest, definitely go check out Another Code, Emio, and Princess Peach for sure.
Absolutely. So the Nintendo Switch 2, after all this time of speculations and everybody wondering what this system was going to be, we finally got the trailer, an update from Nintendo video on January 16th, where we finally got a look at the Nintendo Switch 2. What did you think when you saw this initial trailer? Was it disappointing to you? Be honest, or was it just more or less what you were expecting?
It was like, oh, this is exactly what's being leaked for the last 3-4 months, unfortunately. But we'll expand upon it, but I think what it did for me is I'm more excited about the potential of the Switch 2 than I am the Switch
Yes.
2 itself, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you 1,000%.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give my thoughts
Yeah.
on it because when I saw this initial trailer, like graphics and all that wasn't really what I was looking at. I was looking at how exactly is Nintendo going to go about innovating from either a video game space or from a control space. And when I saw Mario Kart 8, I'm like, okay, so we're going from, what was it, 8 players, 12 players on Mario Kart 8. Do you remember what was the total
I
count for
think it
that?
was 12, and then they're hinting at 24 now, potentially, if you're counting the space or the starter spaces.
Yeah. We went from 12 to 24, which is double the amount of players that we had on the Mario Kart 8. And not only that, just thinking about my past 7 to 8 years with the Nintendo Switch, it wasn't this powerhouse of a console, but the things that Nintendo was able to do from a hardware standpoint, from The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, with all the mechanics that game had, where you could just literally just pop through the ceiling from
Mm-hmm.
hell essentially and make your way back up to the heavens. I thought that was great. I thought the whole mechanic of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, to where you're able to have each and every last one of your party members on the battlefield, and you're able to go into these rings, which were the area of effects, and just use that to attack enemies, as well as transforming into some type of mech via the Ouroboros mechanic, and then the whole, all out attack essentially thing that they had in that game. There was a lot of interesting mechanics that popped up from the Nintendo Switch Ring Fit Adventure that I'm really interested to see what Nintendo does with the Switch 2 from just from a power standpoint. I'm not really here looking for graphics. I'm not really here looking for a graphical showcase. I'm trying to see how Nintendo uses that power for a video game more so than just a, eye
Yeah.
candy. And that 24 player for Mario Kart was a very good beginning of what is hopefully going to be a great generation for Nintendo.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of highlighting how they're going to expand on maybe if there is an increase in power. How is that going to impact what you can do in the game rather than the fidelity of the game? And you and I are very similar in our opinions on this sort of graphical like arms race that just seems to have diminishing returns time and time again. And I think that's what leads into the potential of the Switch 2 because it looks, the form factor looks the same. It's going to have the same utility. I wonder if it's going to be maybe a little too big to be fully portable, which might hint that they come out with a sort of a light version as well that's a bit more accessible in that respect.
Portable.
But I think this there's another rumor, and it is very hinted at in the trailer that these Joy-Cons for this console may have a functionality that is like an optical computer mouse, and that has my brain racing for so many different possibilities. It's not been confirmed. So this could be just a bunch of fan fiction that everyone's coming up, and I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but I think that because they're waiting so long and because they're going to be doing these in-person Switch 2 events, that has me hopeful that there is something else that's a part of the system that is going to need a bit more hands-on tactile demonstration. And that mouse thing is 100% where like my brain is racing. And so I what do you think about that? Like, is that something that you would be interested in?
Oh, absolutely. That thing is going to be a game changer when it comes out. Like I know people are like, oh, it's just a mouse. Mouses have existed for a long time, but I think Nintendo is going to use that mouse in such an interesting way to even where like Microsoft and Microsoft and Sony are looking at it and like, maybe we should start finding ways to bring that into our next generation console. They're like, just thinking about back on some of the games that Nintendo could potentially use this for, RTSs, they could completely evolve the Pikmin series by
Oh
doing
yeah.
this. Even something like a Fire Emblem, they could completely make that a faster game, a much wider game, much more mechanics and strategy going on with that game, where you're just scrolling through the screen, taking a look at your mouse and all your different factions and armies of characters you have on different sides of the map and how you want to utilize that. They might even implement a aiming mechanic within the new Mario Kart game and Metroid Prime. There's a lot of interesting things that Nintendo could do with this that I'm very interested to see what they go about when this thing finally comes out. Even Kid Icarus. Yeah. I know we've been hearing about Kid Icarus Uprising HD or a sequel to that for a while now. Maybe they've just been waiting on this, because even if they were to bring it to console and they were using traditional analog stick, it wasn't where they may have wanted it to be for the optimal Kid Icarus experience.
And then it like cripples your hand too. So, but yeah. No, like man, like holding that 3DS sometimes and playing Kid Icarus Uprising, man. I thought it was just gonna stay in that.
No, I'm with you 1,000%. I even tried using the stand that it came with, and it was no good.
That'll work. Yeah, no, and that was. I loved the innovations that Nintendo had during the 7th and 8th generation. A lot of using the peripheral of the Wiimote, or the Wii U touchpad, or like we were talking about, using the 3DS to have more dynamic control because you're seeing the space in a different light. But form factor, kind of gets in the way, especially for long play sessions. I mean, there's a lot of games I love on the Wii that I can play for maybe like an hour and a half tops, and then my arm starts to give out because I'm just holding it straight the entire time. And the mouse idea, like you said, it's nothing new, but what it does do is allows you to be in a lot more like fixed, relaxed position. And it's not like holding both of the Joy-Cons kind of awkwardly in each hand, separate from like the grip or whatever. This is you're kind of permanently fixed. And Metroid Prime 4 was one of the first games that I thought about. That would be perfect. Where if it has sort of control of Samus's arm cannon, you can just use that to like move, and then just have the separate one to just go ahead and move her character. That sounds great. And it looks like there's possibly like a some sort of like scratch resistant cover that they're putting on them, because it like in that the infographic or the demonstration, excuse me, in the commercial, it snaps into something before it starts to kind of like move around like a mouse. And that has me hopeful that there's maybe some sort of peripheral or not peripheral, excuse me, some sort of accessory that will allow that to kind of be smooth on any kind of surface. Another type of game that I was thinking of is something like Zack and Wiki from the Wii. It was a Capcom game that is, yeah, exactly, like sort of like this old sort of computer style game, adventure game, where like you're just using different things in the environment. And you're using motion control, you're using gyro, but a mouse configuration would like dramatically change the way that you interact with those games. And the other aspect of this sort of mouse, and potentially maybe if they expand upon it, maybe a keyboard accessory or something like that, is I know you're equally as kind of maybe like annoyed by this as well. There's this sort of strange idea in the industry that there doesn't need to be consoles anymore. There just needs to be PC, and everything's going to be on PC, and there's only games that can only be played there. And why would you think about playing them in any other way? And Nintendo should just give up and put their games on PC. And this would be a excellent way to say, no, we're just going to continue doing our own thing and have functionality that a regular optical mouse isn't going to have. We're going to have our built-in HD rumble. We're going to have our gyro. We're going to have all of these things, and we can still have PC functioning games that a lot of kids are more used to now, because they're playing Minecraft, they're playing Fortnite, a lot of these other, large live service games, this would be an excellent way to attract new customers, because we don't need to really cater to the adults, in my opinion, much anymore. I think most adults have kind of made their decision on what platform that they want to play on. And this is a really exciting opportunity, I think, for younger players to maybe jump into an ecosystem that mimics sort of PC playing, but without having to shell out the money for a large PC. I don't know. What do you think that would be like a good strategy?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good strategy for Nintendo. Like there's a lot of games that are on PC that we're like a lot of console guys have kind of been told to just fall back from, because they're more PC centric. They're a lot faster with the mouse and keyboard. The Baldur's Gates of the world, the Sims, the Civilizations, and things like that. Having those with that type of experience with the mouse on the Nintendo Switch 2, and making it so that it's an easier entry point for all
Absolutely.
gamers
And
to
it
just be
just
able
kind
to
of
play those
bridges
games.
that
I think
gap
that would
where they
make
don't
for a
have
really
to
good,
give up
compelling console.
or compromise their vision, but they can still evolve and adapt to some of the industry standards. And so, yeah, like I've heard a lot of buzz about a game called Arctic Eggs, I think. It's on PC only, and it's like this sort of strange game where you get like expelled from like the military or something, and so you have to make eggs for everybody. And so it's like you have like a frying pan, and like you're just kind of balancing things in this pan, and it gets like crazier and crazier as the game goes. And the thing that I've heard is that no one would ever dream about playing it on console. And that sounds like a Nintendo idea. I mean, they'd been doing that like since the Wii, and there are other examples even earlier than that, of having these more sort of experiential peripheral experiences. And I it's a no-brainer to me that Nintendo would move in a direction. Hopefully, we've done a lot of speculating, so hopefully this is what it is, but that would be amazing, and I think would be the defining feature that, like you mentioned, that Sony and Microsoft probably won't be able to ignore, and they'll have to integrate, just like they did with the Kinect or any of these other sort of mid console generation peripheral that they released to compete with Nintendo. Um, I'm really hopeful that Nintendo continues with that way.
Yeah, and even with this reveal trailer, I still feel like there's a lot we don't know about the system. Like, have you
What
heard
I
this whole
heard is that
discussion
people were
about
saying
this
like
C
there's like a
button that's going
C
on
that's
the
like
right
missing or
Joy-Con?
something. I've been trying to stay away from fully, going into leaks, but what have you heard that its kind of potential functionality is?
So they're saying it could
Mm.
be essentially a feature to access what would be their new Miiverse mechanic. Some are also saying it could be a way for Nintendo to switch from to like kind of stream the tablet onto the TV, and then have the tablet portion serve as the bottom screen for the 3DS, so that we can bring in DS and 3DS for the Nintendo Switch Online. I'm also hearing about there was something else they said it was, but those are like the two
That'd
main
be
things
really
that I've
cool, because
heard
that
about that
actually does
capture
feed
or
into
that new
something that
button
I
that they've
did hear. I watched
announced for
this
the
quick
system.
video a few days ago, in a more sort of traditional media analysis of like what it could potentially represent in the market. And they were talking about how, because there's the USB-C a charging slot on the top and bottom now, and potentially there is a functionality where you can attach screens with like a
Yes.
USB-C dongle. And so I don't know if Nintendo would do that. I think it might confuse the market a little bit, and then especially like, more than what they would like. But if there was a possibility of maybe getting a separate screen and you could add one on, they could replicate like DS games and or 3DS games, potentially things of that nature that would really, be cool for like more of this sort of game preservation or possibly an expansion of NSO that was kind of more limited historically because you're kind of fixed to the architecture of the Wii U or the Switch. Yeah.
That would be very interesting. I don't know if Nintendo would
Yeah, I agree.
sell another screen for the Nintendo Switch 2. It just sounds like a little bit too much for some DS and 3DS games. I'm sure they do have a workaround because even the Wii U was able to run DS games on the
Yeah.
virtual console. So if that's able to handle it, I'm sure Nintendo has some type of way to get them on the service. Or who knows, they might just skip it
Yeah,
completely and
and
just
yeah,
go
there. Well, and
either
then
Wii
I
or
haven't
GameCube
personally
for
played
NSO
it,
to
but
further add another
the
console.
Castlevania Dominus collection, which was the compilation of three DS titles, everyone that I heard had praised the way that that was set up, and they really approached the sort of dual screen capability in an interesting way. Unfortunately, you're not able to do a lot of like the tracing stuff that was in Dawn of Sorrow, but they changed it to like QuickTime button events, which I think is a perfectly fine compromise. So yeah, I trust Nintendo too that they're going to do something with that. And but you had mentioned Miiverse. Do you what was I guess what was your interaction or impression of Miiverse? I really enjoyed what it was. I understand that there was some other problems that Nintendo probably just doesn't want to deal with anymore. But is that something that you'd like to see come back? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Look, you have no idea how much I miss sharing like footage and video to Twitter and all that. If there was a place where you could all just get together from respective communities like Miiverse was and just talk about a game, post some
Yeah.
screenshots, some hidden
How do you make
collectibles, some
Metroid
even
crawl
like
is
funny
or whatever
glitches,
it
that would
was that
be
that
a
yeah.
very good time. Yeah. I
Hmm.
loved turning on my Wii U and just seeing like all those like the icons form like a circle on the screen and you just get
Yep.
all these pop-ups on the screen from people drawing messages in Miiverse or scanning some type of image and putting it on the Wii U for like these really professional images. I thought stuff like that was super cool. To this day, that's my favorite,
Yeah, no, I'm
arguably my
100% with
favorite
you. And I
user
think
interface
that's
right next to the
this is
PS3's
kind of slightly
interface.
changing the topic, but it relates to sort of I think a problem that I have with like the way that we kind of talk about consoles now, and I understand why like Nintendo's holding things back. So I'm fully understanding of whatever steps that they feel that they have to take that's necessary. But I was watching a compilation that IGN released a couple days ago of like all of the launch trailers for like every Nintendo console, and it starts with like the Famicom. It doesn't do any more Japanese ones, but then it goes through and has all of the like US advertisements, and there's just this really cool progression from like the NES all the way up until about the initial DS and Wii era that is portraying the consoles as sort of these abstract, cool experiences. And if like anyone's interested, I'd recommend going to that and especially watching the launch trailer for Game Boy Advance and GameCube because they're like these really sort of surreal. Oh, it's so good, and it's like this weird. Oh,
Dude,
peak
that
marketing,
era was
100%,
so
man. It's like
good.
it's it, it it's
Peak
not just
marketing.
showing off what the console is. It's showing off like what the console represents. And like it is watching those again just made me realize how much we've lost in this like shift where that like these companies are not like they don't create experiences anymore, they kind of create technology. And I get it to a degree because technology is just so much more of a part of our lives now. We all have cell phones, we have all of these things, and you don't need to sell people on like tech anymore. But like especially that Game Boy Advance and that GameCube one, they're so avant-garde relative to like what we saw with the Switch 2 trailer. And the Switch 2 trailer is fine. I wasn't upset about it. I think it did what it needed to do, but I don't understand what like the essence of Nintendo is going forward. And when you watch those like older ones, they really sell you on sort of like what kind of experience you're buying into. So hopefully that will kind of, present itself over time. And one aspect of that would be like the UI design and how you interact with people. Because another thing that I noticed about those trailers is that as it goes on, like people in them start to get less and less. And then right at the pandemic, it doesn't have like people outside anymore. Like they're in their houses just playing games. And that's like a bigger thing, yeah, like a bigger thing of like how, culture is kind of perceiving stuff, and the sort of, I think, an impact that the pandemic has had on not only gaming but just like how we interact with each other in public. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping Nintendo, I mean, I might be a little too hopeful, but Nintendo, I want them to kind of show that like these are experiences that we can kind of like share in person again, or have at least like a user interface that is much more about interaction in the way that you said, where like we're sharing the funny memories that we have, or the cool like high score that we pulled off, or like whatever, or the glitch that we found. That's where I want that sort of some of that magic to come back. I don't think it's going to come back in like in how we like think of technology, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just urge everybody to go at least watch a few of those trailers on that IGN video, because it is just crazy how different we think of marketing now than what we did throughout the first like 20 years of gaming.
Yeah, the Switch, despite being like a very multiplayer heavy focused console, did kind of feel like a little bit lonely when you when you boot up like the console. Like you just got these icons,
Yep.
nobody to talk to, everybody doing their own thing, no messaging system, no way to really communicate with anybody unless you were going through the mobile app to message somebody or get in voice chat that way, which I knew people actually taking advantage of that. But yeah, going back to what you said, like even with things like Street Pass and like Flipnote 3D, how you were able to just draw like these little quick comic strips and then send them to somebody, or the what was the thing they had on the DS? I always forget what it was called, but you could like draw little pictures in the PictoChat. That's what it was.
Yeah, PictoChat. And then they also had like where you could in person, like I've been going back and playing some DS games over the last couple years, and like one thing that really stood out to me was that you can like share like things from like the game that you would unlock. So like I played this sort of like a old style like gallery shooter called the Wild West, and you can unlock all these like mini games, and you could just share those with your friends. So if like you happen to play one, you could just send it to them to their DS.
Oh, that's cool.
So like a lot of cool stuff like that.
Yeah, you could even do like let's say it was your birthday or something and I wanted to give you a birthday gift. I could gift you a full game on the Wii. The original Wii, you were able to gift people games on there. I don't know if a lot of people knew that or if they ever even utilized it, but stuff like that is what I kind of miss about Nintendo, and I'm really hoping we get back to that with this whole Nintendo Switch 2 and just building the community back together.
And speaking of sort of community, you and I are collectors, and Switch is like a very popular console to collect for. Do you think how do you think that Nintendo is going to handle physical games this generation? Do you think they're going to continue with sort of the way that they've been approaching it? Do you expect that maybe they're going to have a digital only version of this console? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I do think Nintendo won't pull like a Series S or PS5 digital type situation. I do think they're going to just have their physical thing going on with this console, because I believe they said like 70% of Nintendo Switch owners still prefer to buy games physically. So I don't think they're going to get anyway near away from that. Maybe later in the future they do release just like a cheaper light that doesn't have a cartridge slot or something on it. But for the most part, I don't think they'll release a SKU that doesn't come with a physical cartridge option.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that, especially because they're advertising the sort of backwards compatibility in that. But as you know, that's sort of this new industry trend, is that no physical releases, even for like major AAA ones, or like a digital only console that we saw with the PS4 Pro that you needed to buy an add-on. Yeah, I'm interested. I think in like the form factor too, because like the Switch cartridge is like very similar to like an SD card. So I'm wondering if they're gonna do like sort of like what they did with the 3DS, where they're gonna add a little like plastic chip or something like that to differentiate it. Also, I wanted to ask you, do you think they're gonna change up the color for like the
Gosh, I hope
packaging and
so.
everything
As
else?
much as I love the
Yeah,
size of Nintendo Switch cases, all red spines with just white text is so lame to me. Let's get back to the more
yeah.
fun, vibrant, poppy, spines, even if they
Hmm.
are like 3DS sized cases. I don't care. Let's get back to that.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you. That's what, because the it's interesting that it seems like the colors of the console are kind of more fixed. I don't know. That could just be like what they're showing off with like the red and blue, just to make it a more visually distinct, for like to show each of them snapping on the side. But if they're gonna have like that inlay, I wonder what that's gonna be like for other, colors. If they're, because I imagine Joy Cons are a pretty good market for them. I imagine that a lot of people will buy multiple versions just for specific colors, or I know that you collect special edition consoles. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping that it has a little bit more of a distinction, because I was looking at even just the difference between Wii and Wii U. Like they're both white cases, or they're blue cases, but they have like the white on there. But like you get like the full logo display on there. Like I'm looking at my Wii games right now, and like compared to my Switch collection, which is right next to it, yeah, I can't distinguish the games.
Yeah.
But when I look at the Wii cases, I know immediately what the title is, and even get kind of an idea of what the style of game it is.
Yeah. I have my games in alphabetical order and it still takes me a while.
Me too.
It still takes me a while to find the game that I'm looking for.
Yeah. No. Oh man, it's such a pain to,
But let me ask
especially
you,
just.
do you want to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
to
Good.
PS4 kind of not half cases, but do you want to go to those style of cases, keep what we have right now, or even go smaller with the 3DS size style case?
I think smaller would be cool, not only just from a collector standpoint, because save on space, but I think that there is something neat about like if you kind of look at like the old I don't personally have any of these, but like Neo Geo Pocket or Wonder Swan, like those are really like neat kind of cases, and they're a little bit more compact and small. Or like just how they approached the DS to the 3DS, where they made it slimmer. I don't think they can make the Switch case slimmer, but if it was more of a kind of like smaller rectangle, um there most companies aren't doing inner artwork anyway. So I think there's just a lot of wasted real estate. They're not really doing manuals, unless it's like a special kind of publisher, or
Limited run or somebody?
yeah, like a limited run company. Um, so I think a smaller one would be cool, but I don't know if that would grab people in the same way in this market, especially now that like you go into like a Best Buy or a Walmart, and the gaming section just
Oh my
feels
gosh, it's so
so
depressing.
awful. It's so depressing. And like I pretty much buy all my games exclusively from Best Buy. And just over the course of the last 2 years, it's just gotten smaller and smaller. And I know that we're kind of at the end of the era, and maybe this refresh will do something and they'll have a bigger display. But unless like there are some games now that unless you pre-order them, they won't even put them in stock anymore. And so I think maybe if it was smaller, that might, stores might be more encouraged to have displays. But at the same time, too, I don't know if that will grab people's attention. What would you personally prefer?
I would prefer DS/3DS sized cases, but like you said, there's probably like a psychological reason behind it as to why Nintendo
Yeah.
refuses to make their cases that small. Maybe people consider it to be of lesser value if they were to do it that way.
Yeah, and that's I mean, and as you had talked about that with like graphics and fidelity, I there's such this strange concept of value that I personally just don't understand. Like, if a game is 5 hours or if it's 100 hours, if I'm enjoying it, I can understand that maybe it's not worth 70 or $100, but like I the value is pretty much the same because I'm measuring it on how much fun I'm having with the game, how much I'm enjoying it, what maybe the replay value is. Um, but it seems that consumers have changed a lot in their patterns, especially with games as service games being free, and so value has gotten really like all over the place. And the console itself, the box seems like that it's red still, so they're definitely going to have to do something to differentiate it so people don't confuse it. But at the same time too, like would a bigger box do that? So I'm 100% with you. I think that that 3DS style is perfect, but that may communicate, like you said, this is a lesser handheld console, which unfortunately a lot of people still hold that opinion.
Yeah. And lastly, what do you think about just the overall design of what they showed? I know it's essentially what we had before, but are you a fan of it? Are you a fan of the colors that they chose? What do you think about the offsets as far as the colors under the analog stick as opposed to directly onto the Joy-Cons themselves? Are they even still called Joy-Cons? Or are they called mouse cons or something? Like what? Did we get any confirmation on
Well,
that?
yeah, that's a good question. No, there's no confirmation on that. That's a good point though, because if I mean, it looks like it still has like the same
Yeah.
functionality, but are they Joy-Cons? Are they being conceptualized in that same way? Do they want to compete with like like do they want to cause market confusion where it's like if it's played this way, it's a Joy-Con. If it's played this way, it's like, mouse con or whatever. I'm sure they're going to come up with some very funny way,
Yeah, yeah.
phrase or term to for this experience. And they're very good about that because like even when I was thinking about it, it's like the Switch doesn't really switch; it more snaps. But like, so it would be kind of more of the Nintendo Snap because it kind of snaps to the
That's
controller.
such a
But
cooler
then
name.
Switch
Oh
just
my god, I can't. Why didn't we get that
yeah,
instead of Switch 2? Or like even like the
yeah. And
Nintendo
so, but
clap or something like that. But
yeah, exactly. So but I'm sure that there will be some new fun way to differentiate it, but I don't know. Like, this is because there's a lot of complaining about this not feeling like a brand new console, and I don't agree with that. I think there's enough changes from a design perspective, but I'm surprised at how similar it is, only because I think this would have been an interesting time for them to have kind of like this is bigger, so this will be kind of more of a home console, and then continue to use the Switch as sort of a portable console. And while they're not splitting up their R&D divisions into two different like sects like they had before, I understand that they probably are like, we want to be bold enough to move to a brand new generation, because I think they've been intently watching the catastrophic sort of perception failure that the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles have been. And I know that might sound a bit dramatic, but I do think it is a market failure because there are still games releasing for PS4 that have a high attachment rate that should probably be exclusives to PS5. And I'm understand that it's better in this day and age, especially as games are getting more expensive, to have more buying options. But man, it from a perception level, I think really holding back the PS5 and the Xbox Series like from really being defining. They just feel like another step, but there's not been a singular experience that I think for either of them that feels like, oh, I need to get these consoles for that game. And I know that's maybe not how most people think, but I know that's how you and I think, is that software is king, and Reggie had made that point when he was president of Nintendo. So I think I'm hopeful that they will just take this design and say, okay, it won't confuse the market, but they'll understand this is the exact direction that we're going in, and hopefully those few little new quirks will help not confuse it in the market, and people will feel more confident that they're getting a new experience in a new console.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nintendo's locked in when it pertains to, market confusion and all that, making sure they don't have a Wii U situation on their hands. It was pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Like they did a really good job as far as showing you the Switch One and then essentially putting them side by side to show you exactly why it's different, telling you that all the games that were, most of the games that were on the Switch One would be backwards compatible on the Switch 2, showing you all the different dimensions from the Joy-Cons to the tablet itself to even the new logo, which is just the Joy-Cons moved over to the left a little bit with a giant 2 next to it. So if there's any confusion after today, it's just a personal problem at that point.
Yeah, I gotta ask you, if was it only me that was kind of bothered by when they showed the logo? It was like outside of the screen, and like it was like a white kind of background, and so like it just looked kind of like the logo was sort of blurring into like past the screen. I don't know. I don't know. It was just kind of bothering me for some reason. Like, why wouldn't you just make it a little bit smaller and just show Switch 2 on the screen?
I
But
didn't watch it that closely. Like I watched it. I was at work
yeah,
when they announced it. I was like, oh, okay, it's the Switch 2, and then I kind of just closed the video and went about my day. I saw that the
yeah,
direct was
yeah.
after, but that's what I'm really looking forward to. But
Yeah, and if you wanna, we can jump into that, or did you wanna touch on a bit of Mario Kart?
sure, we could do a little bit of Mario Kart. So we saw that the game had 24 playable characters. I'm not gonna go through all the lists, but we didn't see any new arrivals. They were all pretty much everybody that was in base Mario Kart 8. I'm not sure if Pink Gold was in the Wii U version. It's been so long since I played that game. But we saw 24
Yeah,
playable characters in the game with some really nice redesigns that they have going on there. It reminds me of the Super Nintendo box art for Mario Kart, but overall, it's Mario Kart. We didn't really see anything. It was about 10 minutes of, just kind of gameplay off to the side while also sliding down the tablet into the dock. So
I picked up on that same thing. Yeah, the more cartoony aesthetic definitely feels like they're going back into like the older design sensibilities. So that has me excited. Like I enjoy the Mario Kart series. I'm not a super fan. I think the last one that I really enjoyed was like Mario Kart DS. I think that they've just kind of been playing it safe a bit, and understandably so, because it's their biggest system seller. The games are incredibly well made, and they're very fun party games. I kind of liked some of the ingenuity of the sort of Super Circuit, Double Dash, and Mario Kart DS era. That I thought there were some unique ideas that I'm hoping that they will be able to expand upon. But I think through some other analysis that I've come across, people are speculating that it looks bigger, like the tracks look bigger and there's more
yes,
space. That could be just, or like the size of what of the roster, like you're mentioning, that if there are 24 racers, you're definitely going to need more space. And they experimented with that a bit with the F-Zero 99 NSO game, where like having, it's a different approach, but having that, many people on screen at one
widening
time,
up the map.
I think they exactly they're much wider than the original game. But something that I was thinking that would be cool, and I don't know if they would do it because it's not really in the Mario Kart legacy to kind of change it up this much. But have you ever played a game called Beetle Adventure Racing on N64?
I have not, no.
Okay, so I think you would love it, because I know you like racing games. There is it's much more, it's like Volkswagen Beetles, and so it's a bit more grounded in that sense. But the tracks are very like cartoonish and very fun. But each of like the stages, each time you lap, they change up a little bit, and there's different routes and different shortcuts that you can find. And I know that some of the Mario Kart games have experimented with this, but if the maps are going to be bigger, I think it would be cool if they brought back some of like the terrain hazards that were in more of like Super Mario Kart, Mario Kart 64, and some of the early 2000s ones were like maybe like if you get there's like mud, you kind of get stuck in the mud a little bit more,
Oil spills and
or yeah, exactly. And I know that they kind of exist now, but like there was like a shot comparison that I was watching of a redesign of a Super Mario Kart level or stage. I can't remember which one it was compared to Mario Kart 8 when they did like the whole booster course thing. And instead of having to jump over the bridge to not fall into water, you could just go into the water and then swim. And that's cool because I mean, I think that's what Mario Kart 8 really excels at is like how quickly it changes up the vehicle and like depending on like whether you're flying or you're in the zero G or when you're underwater. But I think adding an element of maybe environmental hazards with more track space could be a fun way to change it up. Or like I mentioned, having like sort of shortcuts or maybe the third lap completely changes or like or however many laps there, the last lap will change up and it will be like a completely different track. So you can't just count on doing the same strategy.
yeah.
It's a huge seller.
No, go ahead.
I
I'm
don't know if they're
sorry.
gonna want to change it up that much. No, you're good. No, it's their biggest seller. I don't know if they want to change it up that much, but I think that would be a cool way of like rebranding this as like a new experience to get away from the fact that, I mean, what they did almost every track in history with that with that
Oh yeah.
DLC. So I don't know how you could retread that necessarily. But sorry, go ahead. What were you
No,
saying?
I was getting back to your point as far as the course design changing in the last lap or something like that. That was something Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed did to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
To like you would do your
Yeah.
first lap, and then by the time you made it to the second lap, like a spaceship or something would come crashing into the level from like a what do you call that game? Like Golden Axe or something like that. Like they would blow up the level with
Yeah.
a giant bomb or something, and then you would switch to either like boat mode or you would switch into flying in through the air. And I thought that was really
Yep.
cool. So hopefully they're able to implement changes like that instead of keeping it on the ground. Like they did have anti-gravity and they did have some of the paragliding with the Mario Kart 8, but I
Yeah.
would like to see that further expanded within Mario Kart 9.
For sure. For sure.
Even like you're playing on a level or something like on Bowser's Castle, and then you get like a message in Kirby Air Riot, like where you would get like this exclamation mark and say, the castle is under attack or something like that, and you would start getting like these fireballs falling on the map or something like that, and you got all these
Yeah.
24 different players trying to get around and not crash into each other and crash into meteors and everything falling from the sky. So if we're able to do stuff like that, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, and that could totally change the game on like like the battle stages,
Hmm.
excuse me, and like giving like objectives would be like a really cool way. And like the Mario series is perfect for that because there's just so many different environments that you could use from that lineage. Oh, and I guess just before we move on, do you think that they're going to integrate Nintendo characters like they did with 8, or do you think they might just go back to basics and just keep it within the sort of Mario universe?
I'm kind of 50-50 on this. Like, I do believe some of the characters like Link and the Inklings will make their way back into the game, but for the most part, I think it's just going to remain Mario Kart. For whatever reason, I don't think Nintendo wants to go into that Nintendo Kart, space. And
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I don't think Nintendo should, because that would kind of, I won't say it would defeat the purpose of making sequels to Kirby Air Ride, to Wave Race, to F-Zero, to 1080, to all these, to the Excite games, to all these other games that we get. But I feel like a lot of Nintendo fans would be happy with that and wouldn't really demand that we get new entries in these games right now. Even right now, F-Zero is really the only one that people kind of want back. And I'm like, guys, they had so many great so many great racing games under their
Mm-hmm.
belt that weren't Mario Kart. So I'm hoping
Yep.
Nintendo keeps it Mario about 90-95% of the game. And then I'm also hoping that we get additional Nintendo racers, because it is a crime that they haven't done anything with Diddy Kong, Wave Race, 1080, What else is there? Oh, we just got Cruisin', which was great, but Cruisin' we could use more of.
Yes.
Just a lot of great racers under their belt. So I'm hoping for just primarily Mario. And there is a lot of Mario games that they do have in their disposal that they could branch out into. They could go into the Mario and Luigi series. They could go into Paper Mario. They could go into Mario Party. They could do so many things to really expand that roster without diving into other franchises. Okay, and I guess with that, the last thing we could talk about, I mean, we were slightly talking about redesigns. What do you think of Donkey Kong's redesign? That's something seems like Nintendo's been trying to get away from that Rareware design of Donkey Kong with the movie as well as this recent game. Are you a fan or are you not? I know this is kind of controversial online right now.
It's a hot button issue, the hot take.
Yeah, I know.
I love them. I love them all, but we have been in the sort of rare DK era since the first DKC, and I know it's Miyamoto kind of has a wishy-washy, at least back in that time, the original release time of like Rare kind of taking his baby from him, but this is the start of something that I kind of want to touch on later on, of Nintendo moving into sort of like a Disney territory. And I think it would be really interesting if they start to separate those concrete designs and themselves from those concrete designs and put those more into like theme parks and merchandising, and then have their games be a place where more design experimentation can happen again. And I don't know if that would perfectly happen, but we kind of saw that with Wonder. And we kind of see that with the different Mario RPGs. So I'm personally a big fan of any sort of like redesign, as long as it's not like, putting them in, I don't know, like, ripped jeans and a gun. I mean, I can't think of anything that would be too crazy.
Bomberman Act Zero compared to the square head cutesy one that we had before.
Yeah. Like, or like, any of those when they during the 6th gen, when they were like bringing back like Bionic Commando, or any of those other ones, like trying to make them look edgy and modern.
Oh, like when they gave Crash tribal tattoos and did all that. Like, yeah, it was interesting time.
A different time. The dark ages, as some might say. But no, like, I think that this still keeps the spirit of it. And it does look kind of more like DK Jr. from, you mentioned like the Super Mario Kart designs. It's not one-to-one, but like it has more of that sort of like large, like he's bigger than the cart itself kind of design. And his eyes are going to be more expressive. Like there was one, if you watch kind of a slowed down look into just Mario doing kind of this little hop, he has like this really kind of like intense, like surprise expression that kind of comes up, that while we wouldn't really see in when we're playing the game, that level of sort of like animation would be really fun if they like, especially if they integrate some sort of like replay feature or some like photo mode in like single player or something, where you can see like the sort of more, them gesticulate and just sort of emote in more intense ways. And I think more cartoony designs are perfect for that. How do you feel about it? I know you're probably a bit more in favor of it, but what do you think about the redesign and potentially more redesigns in the future?
So for Donkey Kong specifically, I feel like that Rareware design under Nintendo, in my opinion, I know some of you probably just going to think I'm doing a 180 because Nintendo did something, so I'm following suit. But in my opinion, that design always kind of looked off when Rare wasn't handling it. Like if you remember, the Donkey Kong games under Rare were kind of very atmospheric. They were kind of dark and gritty in a way. Like you had Donkey Kong, who was this menacing kind of dude bro ape. Like that's what he reminded me of in Donkey Kong 64 with this Run DMC style rap song. First, when you boot the game up, he was lifting weights and he had a coconut gun and he was doing all this. He had this really cool
That
yeah
fires
type
and
of voice
spurts,
and
right?
everything.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
fires and spurts, right? Yeah.
yeah. If he shoots you, it's gonna hurt. But to me, I feel like that was the last time we had that kind of attitude Kong, with that whole
Hmm.
everything that the game, the characters look like, the way the music in the game sounded. I don't know if you remember like Frantic Factory. You would get into this
Yeah.
factory and you would just hear like this clock ticking, and then it was just like this very kind of unsettling song just playing in the background.
Hmm.
To me, when Donkey Kong was that design made sense. But when we're just
Yeah.
going up against polar bears and tiki masks and all that, I feel like a more animated Donkey Kong would make more sense for something like that. So I do agree with this updated redesign for Donkey Kong in the Mario Kart game.
So I guess on that, do you have any, you know, ideas or that you would like to see or that you think that they would do with maybe a Donkey Kong platformer? Because I don't think it would be developed by Retro,
Mm-mm.
because Retro Studios is doing Metroid right now. And I mean, it might be handled in house. I personally, I really would like to play them, but I've never played Jungle Beat or
Conga.
uh, Conga. Yeah, and I know that, but those are similar to like the Rare design. They're a bit brighter. But do you think that with that redesign, that they might want to mix it up? Do you think they might play it safe? What would you like to see out of the DK series? Because I know that you're a big fan.
For one, I would like to go the series to go to back to 3D. We only had one game out of its entire legacy, which was
Hmm.
3D, which is insane. I don't know why we that's something we just haven't explored. I feel like there's a lot of things that they could do with characters within that world, within just the whole DK land, but I would really like to see something like that. Just an open world kind of platformer for Donkey Kong. I don't want it to just be, open world, but more open space like Mario Odyssey. I would really like something like that with Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I mean that was the best part. I mean, like I think what, excuse me, the best part of DK64. Like I know that the collectible part was really what hurt that game for a lot of people,
Mhm.
but having I personally thought it was kind of cool to re-experience like the same stages but with each of the different characters, because like Lanky and Tiny like played so differently compared to Donkey and Diddy, who which I thought they felt very similar to their counterparts, or their excuse me, the
Mhm.
way that they played in the 2D games. And so they Rare really replicated that very well, and like there was an actual weight to how Donkey Kong moved,
Yep.
and Diddy had that sort of gymnastic, like jumping around and bounciness that he has in the DKC games. So
Mhm.
yeah, that would be that's something I wasn't even thinking about, but even with like the redesign, if they are going to continue and expand the series, which it seems that they kind of do when they re-release a game. It seems that that's kind of hinting that we're getting the market ready for, and we're getting players ready for like a new entry. That would be, I would personally love to see a 3D DK in that style that you're describing more than a Mario. I mean, I know
Agreed.
Mario would be
I didn't
more,
want to be the one
yeah,
to say it, but I agree.
yeah, because I loved Odyssey. Like I don't get like overly emotional when I play video games, but there was something very special like immediately about my Odyssey. But I think that the structure of Odyssey over time started to wear a little thin because it was struggling to find that, do like the moon collectibles mean anything? And because you can just find them everywhere, which allowed for progression very simply and very easily. And I think for all players, that's really nice. And having death only tied to coins, but as I was going on, I didn't really feel compelled to complete the game. It just felt like there was never like sort of an end. And I know that was kind of the point, and every game shouldn't be a completionist style game, but I think that's why like Mario 64 still has kind of remained for me like sort of a perfect 3D Mario in some ways, because the level structure in that allowed you, it didn't necessarily, there was only a couple times where that barred you from like getting certain stars, but you could accidentally stumble upon a star, and yeah, it would kick you out of it just because of the way that tech worked back then. But it allowed you to sort of experience the world sort of naturally. And I think
Agreed.
that, yeah, in Odyssey, it was just kind of more like, oh, I do a butt stomp on this part of the sand, and there it is, and okay, cool. It just didn't have that same rhythm that I think even Galaxy and Galaxy 2 had. So I would personally love to see a brand new take of a 3D DK. I mean, they killed it with Kirby. Why not Donkey Kong?
Yeah, and to get back to your point as far as, just doing like, butt stomping a pile of sand and then a moon coming out of it. That was one of the things I liked about Super Mario Sunshine is that every
Hmm.
mission in that world that you went to do was for that mission. If you were going there for red coins, you were there for red coins, but it also let you just take
Mhm.
in the rest of that world while you were doing that mission. If you were there to take on PD Piranha, you were there for PD Piranha and you could not leave that level until you did that. So that is something I would like to see for a potential Donkey Kong, and even if they do go that direction with Mario, I would like to see more focus on the mission as opposed to just random tasks to get medals and medallions.
Yep. Yep. Oh, that would be great, man.
Okay, moving on with that. Great discussion. They ended the Switch reveal trailer by saying we have a Nintendo Direct going on April 2nd, 2025, exclusively regarding the Nintendo Switch 2. I have a couple games here of what I think we should be able or we might see at the Direct, but let me see what one of your games are.
This is where I'm kind of confused
Agreed.
because
I had a hard
yeah,
time coming up with this, like, because anything could happen at this point.
anything, and I think that leads to sort of that potential thing that we were sort of touching on earlier, like the potential of this, because we've reached this weird sort of graphical like pinnacle. Like, sure, there's going to be games that perform better. This isn't going to hit 120 frames per second or have 4K visuals necessarily, but in terms of graphical output, there's not much there. And there are games that are running on PS4 that were made for PS5. So we're at a good place now where everything can kind of just come to this console more or less. But what I think I would like to see more is something like I mentioned about like that sort of Zack and Wiki style thing. If there is some functionality with like this mouse stuff, I want to see something that I wasn't expecting, even if it's kind of throwaway like 1-2 switch. I want to see something that's showing the potential of these new ideas of what the new direction Nintendo's going in. I'd love to see like maybe Arms 2. Another thing that I've heard some people talk about, which would be neat with the mouse, is maybe some a return to like Mario Paint or Art Academy. They had kind of experimented that a bit with the Wii U. It wouldn't be like something that I would go out of my way to get, but it would still kind of speak to Nintendo thinking sort of about their console in multi-layered. But I think the big one for both you and I would be something new from Monolith Soft. I would hope that there's been enough time. I think that it would be cool if there was a new holiday release potentially.
The sad part is Monolith Soft did not make my list. As much as I'm hoping, they're the number one people that
Mm,
I'm looking for at this Direct. I don't know if we'll see anything from them. We had their last
that's
major. Well, I guess it wasn't. Well, was Future Redeemed? Future Redeemed was 2022, and Xenoblade 3 was 20. No, wait. Future Redeemed was 23. Xenoblade 3 was 22. Correct?
yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, because it was 17, Porno was 18, and then yeah, oh yeah, then I wow, yeah, I'm losing track of time because X2 was 17, that was the holiday of 17, and then Torna came out the following year, and then I think there was like about a 2 year gap. So
Definitive
I think
Edition
Future
was one of
Connect,
the years.
that's what it was. I
Yeah.
was like, there was a third release, and I think you're probably right because X is coming out in March. So that is going to be their game this year, and they've been pretty good about not competing with themselves. So, yeah, no, I there's so many games coming out. I forgot that like a giant game from them is coming out
I
on
know.
uh, in March.
But
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
I
go
don't
ahead.
know if we'll see Monolith Soft there again. I'm really crossing my fingers, hoping that they reveal themselves at this direct. But as far as an RPG franchise that Nintendo does have under their belt, I truly believe we'll see Fire Emblem this year, and we'll get a new game either this
Yeah.
year or spring of next year. I don't know if that's going to be a remake of a game. I don't know if it's going to be a
Mm.
port of either the Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn game, or just a brand new game entirely.
Yeah, because we and if you want to, go back and do a time capsule in a previous episode of this podcast, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about Fire Emblem, and it was rumored at that time that the genealogy games might be getting a remake. And personally, I really enjoyed what they did with Echoes, so I think that would be really neat if they revisited something, but I am in the camp that loved Engaged. I thought Engaged was a fantastic game, and I did not touch Three Houses. We did have a pretty deep conversation, I remember, about that in that episode. So that may be a good candidate for what you talked about with some RTS or large battle functionality with the mouse, that it could be channeling something from like, I don't know, like Dragon Force or some of those older large scale military operation games. And I know Three Houses sort of toyed with that, where you had multiple battalions and different groups are on the battlefield, correct?
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
So that would be a cool thing for if you're looking at a large map. Having that mouse functionality would come in clutch for that. So I think that's a really great pick. And we're what, 2 years away from that now. So because Engage was in the early 2023.
Yeah. And even something like, you're playing the game and then like your team is just getting destroyed on one corner of the map. So you grab the map to slide it down and then have some type of morality
Mm.
thing to where you're just clicking on the troopers or something like that. And everybody's just getting in a better sense of the situation and then starting to do better in combat. So there's a lot of interesting things that they could do within this gameplay that I'm interested to see.
You're saying they're going to bring back the head patting game that they cut from
Look, man.
Engage?
Yeah, we never got that over here in the West.
Yeah, yeah. We demand, Nintendo gamers demand their head petting mini
Yeah, the
games.
face
So yeah,
petting
no,
mini
I
game.
think yeah, no, I think that would be a really cool way, because like, positioning is like how you would get that affinity, but like if you're having these large groups going over and then maybe like giving them like some rally points, like like I'm encouraging them or something, that would be a really cool mechanic to add to like a larger scale battle, that when you're managing multiple groups. So yeah, no, that's a great pick. What else
Mm-hmm.
did you have, man?
Let's see. Let's go through my list. What did I have here? I had Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Mario Kart 9 will launch on the same day that the Switch 2 comes out. I don't think Mario Kart 9 as a launch title it's going to be the best-selling game on the system, don't get it twisted, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's smart to just launch with Mario Kart exclusively. And Nintendo historically
Mhm.
has done this to where they've launched multiplayer games with a single player game. We had Mario 64 with Wave Race. We had Luigi's Mansion with what multiplayer game did they have on the game? Was it Wave Race Blue Storm?
I don't was Blue Storm launch? I remember Monkey Ball was there.
Yeah.
And then was Melee right after that too?
Melee, I
Right
want to say
around?
was a few months after the fact, but I believe it was Luigi's
Yeah.
Mansion and Wave
Yeah.
Race Blue Storm. And then
That
for
sounds
Wii,
that
we
that's probably
had
about right.
we had Twilight Princess as well as WarioWare and Wii Sports.
Mm-hmm.
We had New Super Mario Bros. U, even though it technically is a multiplayer game, as well as Nintendo Land. And then we had Breath of the Wild with some third-party multiplayer games like Bomberman coming out for the Switch. I do think it would be smart for Nintendo to have that single-player type of game for people that just kind of want to break from Mario Kart. They had their fun, now they want to go dive into another world to where they can just be by themselves and have a great single-player story game with them. So What do you think with that?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's a good pick. I would kind of miss something like a surprise, sort of like what Snipper Clips was.
I was gonna
Um,
bring that up. I'm glad at least
yeah,
somebody else remembers that game.
yeah. No, unfortunately, it was a game that I never got through because I could just never get anybody to stick with it because it was they would just get so frustrated about like the positioning. But it was a ton of fun. I hope that if there is some weird, new functionality to the Joy Cons, there could be something like that. But I think Metroid would be. I don't know, like it. You and I have, I think, touched on this before, and a lot of people have about the sort of confusing state of Metroid, where Metroid is such a revered series, but it's like there are games that it inspired that have sold more than the entries in the series, and so it's very odd. And with it being the fourth entry, and they did release, Metroid Prime Remastered. I don't know. I would be happy personally as a fan that that would be like the launch title, but I don't know if that would be their go-to. But if it's cross-platform, that might be the what like Twilight Princess was, and so I think you could be onto something with that. I and it would cover that whole spread. I don't know. I guess I just don't know how much confidence uh, Nintendo has in Metroid as a sort of standout IP, but maybe this game is so good and it would show off the mouse functionality that it could be the killer app for it in not only showing the strength of the system, but just the strength of the game itself.
Yeah, and that's also you brought up a good point. The whole aspect of the mouse, that's where Metroid
Mm-hmm.
Prime would come into play. I said it would either be Metroid Prime 4 or they would have a pack-in game, something simple, even like a duck hunt, to really show what this mouse is capable
Mm.
of doing.
Dude, I would love that. That's a cool because I one thing that I was thinking of was I had when I mentioned earlier that I was kind of jumping into NSO and trying out a few things. I played through Star Tropics, and I wouldn't say it's like a game everybody should play, but it was just a really weird game that was part of that like strange NES era for Nintendo when they were just trying out a bunch of new things. And I would love to see something like that or Duck Hunt get like sort of reimagined. And Duck Hunt would be a really cool, like sort of point and click game. I love that cartridge. I had the dual. I still have the dual Mario Brothers Duck Hunt with the
Okay.
original orange light gun. Yeah, that my uncle got it, and that was back in the day, and he gifted that to me in the early '90s, and I just love the little the clang of the stupid gun trigger, and the game is just a lot of fun. So that would be a really fun surprise, is like a little pack in, or maybe just it's on the console itself. That like an Astro kind of thing. That
Yeah,
would be really cool.
a nice little Time Crisis duck hunt. That would be a very
Mm-hmm,
cool
mm-hmm.
pack-in
Now
game.
you're speaking my language,
Yeah.
man.
All right, what do you got?
Well, from what I covered, that was it. I think the main thing that I want to see is more like the delivery of the presentation. Like I think the thing that I I have confidence in saying that I've got the receipts of like loving how Nintendo has approached marketing and presentations. But a lot of people like to pretend that they were fans of the Wii, 3DS, Wii U era of directs, and there was just a ton of complaining. Nobody liked the sort of ingenuity and fun way that they kind of had with those presentations.
Oh, I loved
And so
it,
I'm
but
not.
I
Oh
understand what you
man,
mean.
I know you. Yeah, I know it. I know that you did, man. Like, cause it it's again talking about that sort of approach on advertising that I mentioned earlier. So I think I'd like to see a new way that they sort of approach games. The Switch market is so big that I don't know if they'll do it right away, but I would like to see like some new faces, some new creators, some new people that are going to be taking over the industry, and sort of what the face of Nintendo might be in the next 10 years. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think that's what makes Nintendo really unique in the gaming sphere is that they have personalities and they have directors that people know on a first and last name basis. And there's very few people in the gaming industry that people actually know. And so it would be neat if because like I think the last game that Koizumi directed was like Galaxy. And so if they brought out a few new people that are developing new things, I know they had like Shinya Takahashi was there, and he's like part of the console design and he's in a lot of them. But I would just like to see some of that, some sort of personalizing of Nintendo and maybe some more skits or things of that nature. And then I think just more experimental IP. I know I'm alone in that. I can say Mario, I can say Zelda, but we know that those are going to come. I think this is just a really cool and unique opportunity for Nintendo to sort of rebrand themselves now that we've been in this sort of new era of them. And I don't know if they will, but they opened the museum. That was another thing that they did last year. So they
Oh,
seem
you're
to
right.
be more, yeah, they seem to be more comfortable with like letting the public in this sort of notoriously very like secretive company. And so that would be something that I would personally like to see, just a little bit more personality on that, because I could say like the things that everybody's saying. I want to see Elden Ring. I want to see Tekken 8. I want to see like, okay, cool. Like I think those would be fine, but They're not going to move the industry forward. Um, but so that's sort of my personal opinion. But I all of the games that you mentioned, I would be like over the moon for. And I think again something like Arms 2 or the open world Donkey Kong that you mentioned, that's really where I want to be surprised. So I think this is going to be probably about like an hour long presentation. That's kind of how long the first or the 2017 presentation was. So there's a lot of room. I mean, look, we had like Octopath Traveler, Shin Megami Tensei
Day five,
5.
yep. Oh my, the pop off we did
Oh,
on the Discord when that
oh,
when they announced that game.
oh. Then they had like what was it like they like it was still in development, but like the two No More Heroes games. I mean,
Oh,
just
the Travis Strikes Down,
tons.
and people were like upset because we were excited for a JPEG, and I'm like, guys, let us have this. This is no more heroes right here.
It's No More Heroes. Exactly. So yeah, I want some of that energy like sort of injected into it, and that's again what I mean by the potential. Like when I watch so many of these other presentations, it just feels so bland and just whatever. Like, and I get it. They're commercials. We're buying products, but I miss some of that old energy, and so I'm hoping that the Switch 2 can bring a little bit of that back, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you 1,000%. I was talking to my other friend Zach last week about how much we miss the puppets, how much we miss the whole Iwata
Hmm.
versus Reggie fighting with the new Smash Brothers trailer, how much we missed the
Yep.
what was it, the Robot Chicken E3, how much we missed the Mega
Yeah.
64 collaboration. There was a lot of fun that Nintendo did during that time. Even if they weren't in the best position with the Wii U, that still made it a really good show to watch for their audience.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That because I had uh, you and I had talked about this a while back, but like I'd kind of just shunned a bit of the like seventh gen for a while, and so and I like I just kind of got out of gaming, and then in 2012, 2013, 2014, I got into it with the 3DS and the Wii U, and it was just this really interesting time where I kept hearing about how miserable the gaming industry was. There was nothing good coming out, and the entire year, even if it was just 5 games or whatever it was for the Wii U, I loved every single one of them, and it seemed Nintendo was having fun making them. And so that came through 100% with what how you described those experiences. But yeah, like when Iwata did that like that plunging dive with his like head first
Oh
into
yeah,
Reggie, like
yeah, yeah.
it, and I know because you had mentioned this in our Discord recently, but you know we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of his passing, and so um, I don't. They're a private company. I don't think they're going to do anything like big, but I think the Switch was sort of the last of his legacy, and so you and I and a lot of other people that are fans of games are very appreciative of what he did for the industry and what he like left behind. And I hope that this can be like truly kind of a year of celebration, that we're still sort of in the image of his design philosophy. Like the Switch 2 is still very similar to what he conceptualized with the Wii U and with the Switch before his passing. So it's a really unique and fun time. I think that we could potentially have on our hands for the this next console generation.
Yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting generation. I can't wait for it. I'm gonna just go through some of the rest of my predictions. We don't have to spend too much time on them. But I put Square Enix will reveal themselves a few times, and then in parentheses I put Bravely Default. I know reveals themselves does sound crazy.
Yeah.
Now that I say it. Now that I say it
you know,
out loud.
it's a new era. Maybe they're going a little bit edgy.
We got Bravely Default, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy IX, and Dragon Quest XII. I do believe we'll see Bravely Default and hopefully Dragon Quest XII. I know they've been kind of having a little bit of struggle with Dragon Quest XII just because they've been having a good amount of people passing away during that game's development, from Akira Toriyama to the composer and potentially some other people that I'm just not tracking right now. But hopefully we see that game with Nintendo. And Dragon Quest XI was actually the very first game announced for the Switch. So I'm wondering if they're going to do the same thing for Dragon Quest XII.
That's a good point. Yeah, because that was the big speculation then, because they made that special port for the 3DS and then integrated that, into S. Hands down, it's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. So I understand the pressure that they're going under, and losing so many crucial people to that process has to really, hurt that development. But I'm hopeful that they can turn it around. I think the Enix side, or whatever, the last few remnants of that of Square Enix from like those days, I trust to even if they evolve the game to make it something unique and interesting. I just personally hope it doesn't go full action. It's maybe like some sort of hybrid. I know, like, I don't have an opinion on them, but I know the remakes of Final Fantasy VII have sort of a hybrid mix. So if they were going to do something new, I'd prefer it to be at least something like that versus full action. But I think that's an excellent solid pick, and would be perfect for not only the handheld aspect, but also just for Japan, because that series is still a huge system seller there.
Yep. And then I put Daemon X Machina 2. I said we'll get a blast from the past, because we are getting a Daemon X Machina 2. They announced it like a year or so ago. We just haven't seen anything from it. I announced a blast from the past Nintendo IP, and I put F-Zero, Custom Robo, or Donkey Kong. F-Zero just for the simple fact that we've been getting like a lot of build-up with that series as of late via the NSO and all those Game Boy Advance games they've been releasing, the Nintendo Switch Music app, and just a bunch of other cameos with F-Zero. So hopefully F-Zero 99. So hopefully they're testing the waters, getting people used to the series that may have missed out on it. I mean, it's been almost like 20 years now. So hopefully they're just getting people ready for the next installment with that. And Custom Robo, I'm just throwing it out there because I want a new Custom Robo game, and it does seem like an odd pick that Nintendo would bring out of their back catalog and just give it to us randomly.
Well, if we're getting Famicom Detective Club new entries, I mean, I don't see any reason why Custom Robo wouldn't get one. I think because the last one was on DS, I believe, and so it would. I think there's a level of sort of interactivity that they could do with an online functionality that could. I mean, you could have online battles. I don't know. Did they add that functionality into the NSO for Japan? I don't know if they did that or not, but that would be a perfect series for that. I mean, because you could have a balance of having it be the sort of more RPG centric, how more RPG centric on how it was on GameCube, but then also have sort of like a multiplayer component, and that would also be a great game to control with like sort of a mouse style, especially because like the level designs are a little bit maze like, and so if they expanded upon that, that could be cool. I mean, I know it would probably be better to control with a controller, but that's an awesome pick. I would love to see like a new take on that series, with some new fresh eyes, because it's been a while. It's been 20 years almost. No, geez, yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
probably has been.
know. I know. But even
Yeah,
with
man. No,
Custom
that.
Robo, my idea with that was that Nintendo has Bandai Namco has a Nintendo exclusive team that they built up like a year or two ago. And
Mm,
Custom Robo to me makes a lot of sense under the hands of Bandai Namco. So I'm hoping they can do something with that if they're not working on Smash or something else.
yeah, no, that would. Well, I guess speaking on that, do you think that they'll do just like a port of Ultimate, or do you think that they're gonna try to do a new Smash? Because I know it seems maybe that Sakurai is back in development, and that could mean Kid Icarus, as we were talking about earlier. Do you think they're gonna attempt a Smash anytime soon, or would it just make more sense to like port it with like all of the characters on the cart or whatever, and then just kind of have people double dip?
See, and that's where this list was really hard in trying to come
Yeah.
up with because there's so many games that I feel like were due for an update. It doesn't even have to come out this year, but within the next year, Animal Crossing was 2020. It's now
Mm-hmm.
2025. Super Smash
Mm-hmm.
Brothers was 2018, even though they did still do, support for that game for a couple years after that. ARMS was another one that was a launch title. Even Xenoblade, the last mainline game, came out in 2022, but the turnaround from X, which came out in 2015, to Xenoblade 2, which was in 2017, and that only took 2 years. So it's
Yeah.
very hard to predict this list to predict this list right now
Yeah.
without just throwing everything in there. So
Correct. Yeah, and that's where I struggled, and because I didn't want to use it as a cop out. I just like I was just kind of like wanting to see something like new or unique, but I think all of what you've picked is like would be an amazing, not only just launch lineup, but throughout the year, providing a lot of different um, genre and a gameplay variety. And that's something that I think the Switch has really excelled at. It may have failed, I think, in some of its approach to live service or sports and multiplayer games. So I'm hoping that there's sort of been an internal reassessment of that. Like, I don't think everything needs to be a free update 3 months later,
all the Mario
for
sports
no
games and
reason.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just I get it. I understand, but I think the attention span of people is so much smaller now that if you just released them like in the big way that they were like in the GameCube era, I think that would lead to a lot more of the longevity. Because it confuses me because they've done that with the Mario Party games. Like we didn't touch on it, but like I've been slowly picking away at Jamboree with my girlfriend, and there's so much content in that game, and it's I actually like there's like a weird amount of unlockables in that game where you have to kind of get achievements to unlock more of the maps, and so it's encouraging you to like play the single player
Interesting.
mode. Yeah, and play more of the like there's a whole section of motion controlled games specifically. Then you have like a set of maps that are there, and then you so you can just play like your regular Mario Party, but you have either like the traditional sense or you have like a pro rule sense, and you get different achievements with that. So it's really content rich. I struggle with some of that, like because I don't necessarily like that you have to kind of win a game 10 times to get a little badge that then moves you on this strange sort of like timeline to unlock another stage. But I guess it does keep you engaged more with it. And the last one that I can really think of that had something to that degree was like Mario Party 2. I haven't played much of the GameCube one, so I don't know if they had more unlocks. But I just know that like in Mario Party 2, after you played all of the maps, you unlocked another map. So like I think it's cool that like even if like you're just playing by yourself, there's more content there. So I think that that would be something that could translate into this new era with like with the titles that you're talking about. Of they're already sort of experimenting with how people interact with new experiences, and especially when they're revisiting older IP or dormant IP. So I'm just hoping that they move away from this sort of weird like as what was like the Wii Sports thing seemed like a complete win, and it didn't even come with golf, right? Like it
It's
didn't
my favorite
come.
Wii Sports game too.
Exactly. Like what is this? Like this doesn't make any sense at all. And that's all that everybody talks about is like, why didn't you just release this like 5 months later? Like just do it with everything there.
Yeah.
Because like I go into it's been a while, but I go into old folks' homes and they still have that Wii and Wii Sports hooked up, and they're still playing that thing. So like, why limit yourself? I really hope that changes.
Yeah, because like the finished products for like I don't know if you played Mario Golf Super Rush. It's a very good game, but it's just a lot of people
Mhm.
won't stick with it that long to get to that point to where the game is truly finished. Even with Mario Tennis, I thought that was a really good one that roughed really. I see me that launched really rough at first.
Yeah, like I that's what I'd been intrigued by with both of those because I thought the story modes looked cool, but then I just heard a lot of kind of okay, like this is coming in a later update, and so it kind of put it off. So I hearing you say that, like I do want to go and like pick those up because I think some of those games, especially like those early golf games I know on like Game Boy Color, like that were made by Camelot, were like are a lot have a lot of fans, and I know you like Golf Story too, right? Like
Oh
having
yeah, that
like
was one of the
more,
first indies I played on Switch. I had so much fun.
yeah, and so like having more of that sort of interaction with it. So like I heard that there was a pretty interesting story mode for, and I don't mean like the story's deep, but for Mario Tennis, and so yeah, no, hopefully that they can go more that route, and because I know that they're going to be doing it, but it seems that every single one of those games did not. They may have sold okay, but they did not have good reputations.
Correct. And that was actually a video I wanted to make before the Switch 2 got here. Just going over all the Mario sports titles and seeing if they're really as bad as we believe them to be. Which, you know, it's not that they didn't earn those criticisms when they were first coming out, but once all was said and done, I want to just go back and really, really talk about all of them.
No, I think that would be an awesome video, man. I think that's a great idea because I think some a good approach, you know, to praise, take a moment to praise your videos. You have a good way of analyzing the faults of something, but then like how it works sort of in the larger picture of it. And I think there every time I click on a review, and I get it, there's so much content out there, there's so many games, there's so many things just trying to like occupy our time, but it just seems that like everyone just focuses on like the one or two negatives of things, and I'm not actually, and then it'll be like they'll complain the entire review, and then it'll be like 8 out of 10,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, what is going on?
Feel
Like
like the
this,
game I played last year for $60 all over again, but pick it up. It's like, wait, what?
yeah, exactly. And so you know, that was like, you know, I think of like your Slitterhead review. That's those were the like the points that really kind of stood out to me, and so I think that would be an excellent, you know, analysis of those kind of titles that are a little bit controversial in the community. Especially, I know the what I can't remember the name of it. What's the soccer one? I know it's Strikers, but
Was it
I can't
Battle
remember the
League?
what was that?
Why am I forgetting the name of
No,
that? Why am I
I
forgetting the name of it? I
exactly,
played it for
but
like a
like
month and then dropped it. But I
yeah,
know
and that's
Mario Strikers. It was the third one. I just cannot think of the name
the
for it.
subtitle, or yeah, no, because it was Mario Strikers, then Supercharged, right, for the Wii, I think, right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
And or was that the Switch? I don't know. At this point, fake Nintendo fans. That's what we'll say that. But
Frauds. It was Battle
uh,
League. I typed it in.
okay, Battle League, and so, but like that's where like you have these two like really revered entries into a sports like a sports entries, and and now I'm thinking about this too. And sorry to just jump, is another DS game that I've been trying out recently. Have you ever played Mario 3-on-3, the basketball game for
That game has
DS?
been on my timeline so much as of late. Mario Hoops. I thought the box art was always
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
cool as a kid, but I just never bought it.
If you can find a copy for cheap, it's not gonna like revolutionize you like the way you think about video games, but it's like but Square developed it. It is just so
Oh, interesting.
interesting and yeah, yeah, and so like there's actually like little Final Fantasy characters that you unlock later on in the game, like and but it has like a really nice roster, and it's just 3-on-3. But it does really cool things with like the basketball mechanic in that like you're just tapping on the touchpad to dribble, and but your character's moving. It has like a default dribble, but then you'll go over like the question block icons, and then that's how you will pick up items to like attack the players with, or you'll dribble faster to get coins, because the point is that it's not just to go back and forth and just score baskets. It is to rack up a bunch of coins and then do different types of shots. So if you do a dunk, it's going to be less points, but then you can sort of keep like moving the stylus, and they'll do kind of like these little flips in the air, and that will accrue more coins. And so it's about accumulating points through all of the things that you collect. And then there's like just two halves, just like a regular basketball game. Um, and then you're like swiping on it to like steal, swiping to pass. I was very surprised by it. I just played it recently. I started playing it recently. And so that level of kind of ingenuity might be something, again, cool with like a new peripheral or something along those lines. So yeah, if you come across a copy of it, I mean, it's a fun novelty, alone, but I think you might dig some of the aspects of it.
Yeah, I may check it out. I've been thinking about getting back into my 3DS again. A couple other level 5 games I want to go back to. But I got like two more. I got a message from Aonuma coming out. He'll say, the Zelda team is hard at work on the latest entry in The Legend of Zelda. Here is Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess, so leave us alone. We just gave you Echoes of Wisdom and Tears of the Kingdom. And the new game we won't be ready until about 2030.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't sound unreasonable.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's so, and I'm like, no, because they announced Breath of the Wild in like 2013, and
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
I remember we were all calculating if Link was a girl in that game based off the the original trailer.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think that when you first said that, I thought he hit you up personally. I was like, oh man, I didn't know you were on
Oh no, could you imagine?
A DM basis, yeah, without no. But we might get, this podcast might get some hookups. But no, I think that would be hilarious. Everyone will get excited to see him on screen, and then it will just disappear.
Yeah, just fade into
that. But that actually kind of reminds me of something that I wanted to touch on. But go ahead and say your last game before I kind of move on to a different aspect of that.
Oh, Atlas will reveal themselves with Metaphor, as well as a release for, a trailer for Persona 6 or a Shin Megami Tensei game, new game, or spin-off game. And then my last one.
Yeah,
because they said they had a lot of announcements coming out this year, so it'll either be part 2 of the Etrian Odyssey collection for the Switch. It'll be a Shin Megami Tensei, probably PS2 or DS series, whether it's Devil Survivor or Digital Devil Saga. Or it'll be Persona 6. Even though that team was working on Metaphor, I do think they have at least something to tease in regards to Persona.
Yeah, because there was a leak a year or two ago, right? That Digital Devil Saga And Devil Summoner, right? We're possibly getting re-releases or compilations.
Double Summoner, yes. Saga, I'm not entirely sure about that. I know they're always putting out these little interest list in what do you call
Yeah.
surveys, but they never really said anything about it outside of Summoner, which was I believe leaked through Steam or something.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I think yeah, I would love for any of that, especially because um you and I spend a lot of time playing retro games, but there's just something about that form factor with the portability of the Switch that just allows me to complete so many more RPGs. And I would love for any of that back catalog from Atlas to come through, or any of their newer titles. So I mean, that would be a big deal if I have a feeling, Metaphor would be up there, but you're fairly confident you think that Persona 6 would be a Switch 2, not exclusive, but like maybe timed exclusive or console launch or in the console launch window.
Not even oh, a launch window, probably not, but I just think that it's probably gonna be announced there.
Hmm.
Same like now, if we're talking exclusives, Devil Survivor 3 would probably be the Nintendo timed exclusive.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be I would love that to come back, or for them to dive back into some of those earlier games and maybe give them a brand new entry. I guess they did Soul Hackers too. So
Yeah, yeah. We won't talk about
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
I got two more. Then we have a montage of jazz music playing in the background as we get Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Elden Ring, Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto, some sports game, Persona 3, and more Yakuza games, as well as a Tales of game, probably Tales of Arise. And then lastly, 3D Mario.
Hey man, needs to get you on their marketing team. You have this whole thing
I
laid out.
got an idea of some things I would like to see. But even then, I feel
Yeah,
like
no,
my list is kind of underwhelming compared to what will actually be announced there.
but I think that's you know I think that's sort of a good segue into sort of what I had reached out to you about, of like wanting to talk about sort of like the future of the industry. And I think there's a lot of companies now playing it safe, but in a weird way that is sort of hurting them, because they're taking these big financial gambles, and then they can't afford to even just allow the thing to find an audience, and it's just causing a bunch of uncertainty, and publishers going out of business, closing game divisions, closing down games entirely. And so I think there is sort of like a play it safe angle that Nintendo could take that would be very beneficial for them. I think it would be very smart to have all of those games that you listed on there. I think that would be a killer launch year. It would help separate, not only in terms of like uh functionality, but like just in terms of like what people thought was possible. Like they didn't think that like Doom and Doom Eternal could be on the Switch, but they're there. The Wolfenstein games are there. There's a ton of Witcher 3, a bunch of impossible ports that are on the Switch. And so that would really kind of, I think, put a lot of detractors in their place, that this new console can't handle some of these larger experiences. I think that would be really cool. I think SD cards had gotten somewhat cheaper since the launch of the Switch, so I think maybe Bandai Namco would, or Square would be more confident in maybe spending a bit more money to put Elden Ring or Final Fantasy VII Remake or whatever on a cartridge. They'd have to do some compression, but I think it would work. But that does then raise the potentiality of maybe $70 games being the standard. I don't know. But I think playing it safe works for this first year. But I do agree that there's definitely going to be some hidden surprises, because there always is with Nintendo. Excuse me. And that's where their legacy, I think, for the Switch is going to last, because all of the hottest sellers have not been graphical powerhouses at all.
Yeah, no.
But the other thing that I wanted to sort of bring up to you is that we were talking about like Alanuma and some of these other people. We're kind of in a special time, in my opinion, that this is sort of the last of like the last era of like the gaming auteurs, and we're gonna see a lot of these guys retiring over the next 10 years, and or something else that possibly worse that I don't wish on anybody, but that's sort of the reality that we'll be in for the next 10 years. And there was like recently a film director, David Lynch, passed away, and just this past week, a few days ago, and he makes really experimental, out there, like surrealist drama films, but they had a huge impact on like video games. So if it were not for like David Lynch, we wouldn't have like Link's Awakening, we wouldn't have Silent Hill, Deadly Premonition, a bunch of like sweary or like Suda 51 games. Um, and that seemed to be kind of like the motivation of a lot of the gaming industry, is that they would look to these very cutting edge directors, both in gaming and in like other media, to like influence gaming. And it seems like we're kind of in this strange place where like gaming is influencing gaming, and we're not really looking at individual creators anymore. Like I think there's a couple like on Sony's side, but I would struggle to name, even as someone who's as deep into video games, struggle to name most of the directors of video games now. There is no really like new Miyamoto, and so I think Nintendo is in sort of like a trajectory where they might become like a Walt Disney company, like I mentioned earlier. And I'm hoping that that means, though, that they can start to get back to a bit more of a shift in the gaming landscape, because I know you see it online, and it is, you can't say like the real world is like what it is on the internet, but man, so many of the conversations are just so annoying, because it's never about the game. It's just always about like what somebody's doing to invest in this or something like that. And I don't know, like when I was reading Nintendo Power or playing going to like the video store to like rent something, I wasn't worried about what the shareholders thought. And I'm hoping that Nintendo can kind of continue to stay, even in the absence maybe in of some of these big time creators over the next few years. I'm hoping that they can continue on and keep developing these sort of experiences that we tend to expect from them. I think this is going to be a really powerful, special generation, but it also could be the last generation of traditional console gaming, and of how we perceive it. And maybe that means there's more experiences like VR or something like that in the future. But it's hard for me to imagine gaming continuing at this rate in another 10 years. But I know that was a bit sort of more like lofty and big picture,
No, you're good.
but yeah, it's just it's something that I was kind of thinking about, that we're and I think I oversaw a tweet too a couple days ago, just thinking about that this will be like the last era of Nintendo as we have kind of known it since the early 80s. And so do you I mean, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, or like any hopes or wishes, but do you think that console gaming can continue on in this climate, or do you think that if anybody's going to change it, it's going to be Nintendo, in my opinion? But do you think that there's a shift that you've been noticing, like in like the way that people kind of perceive video games in your life, or is this maybe just me being too online and thinking about this a bit too much?
No, but I don't know how much it will affect Nintendo specifically. Like this whole concept of the Nintendo Switch could be completely thrown out the window come next generation after the Switch too. So it may be a complete restart in that sense, but as far as Nintendo being a a video game console company, I don't think that's going to be going away within the next 10 years or so. Now Microsoft and Sony, that's a completely different a completely different story. Microsoft is already on their way out the door. Like they're kind of just on borrowed time right now. They
Yeah.
completely pulled the physical media out of store shelves, so you can no longer buy. Excuse me, I won't say you no longer can buy, but a lot of the stores are starting to remove Xbox game cases from stores. They're starting to become a third party publisher that still decides to make a box for whatever reason, instead of just diving into the whole I'm a third party company now, I'm going the way of Sega and just becoming a publisher supporting PC, Nintendo, and PlayStation. They still insist on having a box, but I do think next generation for them will probably look very different. And even in the realm of PlayStation, when I look at the moves that they're making, it doesn't seem like they're doing things that, how can I say this? They don't seem like well thought out decisions. It seems like they're just doing
Yeah.
things to do things to try to scrape in as much revenue as they possibly can. At least under Jim Ryan and Herman Holst. I'm not entirely sure what the state of the company was under the other presidents, but it seems like internally they don't think what they've been doing is working for them financially, because I believe even their CFO was saying that they're spending a ridiculous amount of money on games, and that's the reason they've been remastering all these games. There's a reason they've been remaking all these games, just because they're trying to get. There's a reason they've been putting their games on PC, because they're just trying to make some of that cost back. So
Hmm.
there may be an identity shift within PlayStation. I'm hoping their console doesn't go away, because I just want them to get it right. Like I love the PlayStation 1,
Yeah.
PlayStation 2, but ever since they decided to make Microsoft their competition, it just really hasn't been the PlayStation I like. But if they continue on the track that they're on right now, to where they're overcharging for hardware, they're increasing the prices of, online and peripherals with no added benefits. They're shutting down studios left and right, acquiring studios and then shutting them down before they even get a chance to make a
Hmm.
game. I don't see them being around much longer either. And they're already as well putting a lot of their games on Nintendo, from the Horizon games, from the MLB
Yeah.
games to I feel like there was a couple other games. Freedom Wars. There's a lot of games that they've been slowly started to support Nintendo with. So I don't know. For them, I do think gaming is going to look very different in the next 10 years, but I think Nintendo will be okay.
Yeah. I think I think that's a realistic expectation. I suppose that there's just kind of like that shift that we had sort of we were talking about with like even with like marketing and like how we think of gaming companies. And I with Nintendo making more movies, because like they have the Zelda greenlit, then there's probably going to be a Mario 2 movie, and
Got
they have the
theme
theme parks.
parks.
Yeah, like this seems like a much more sort of like like I don't want to read too much into it, but like gaming seems to be that it might be like the way that they promote like interactive experiences like in the future. And I don't think I agree with you. I don't think that they're gonna be like completely gone away from gaming. I just hope that it's not like a Nintendo Switch 3. And if Sony and Microsoft sort of go away, um I suppose they'd only be competing with like PC and mobile. But it would be kind of wild to just have a only one console manufacturer in the industry. Really, I don't know if Sony will not do a PS6. But I agree. I think that was a very wise observation that you mentioned of like that shift from viewing Nintendo as the competition to Microsoft has ironically hindered Sony more than Microsoft, because Microsoft always really kind of didn't know what they were doing. They were just kind of trying new things, and I think they just lucked into the success that they had with the 360 for a variety of like good, they had some good ideas, and they offered Xbox Live service, and the price point was better. But I don't think Microsoft like stumbled into anything specifically magical about the 360. I just think it was the right time for like a console like that. But Sony and a lot of Japanese studios shift to viewing them as like, okay, we need to beat them. Yeah, it stopped a lot of those. I mean, I don't need to tell you, we haven't had an Ape Escape. There's been nothing like
Yeah,
Bib
don't
Ribbon
remind
or, and
me.
I know there's been nothing like that. And that's where like I feel like maybe I'm putting all my eggs in one basket with Nintendo, because when I think of like my niece or other kids that I know, like they're not excited necessarily about the things that a lot of adult gamers are. And it would just be kind of weird for them to just not really have like a voice in the industry. And I think that Nintendo is making a smart decision through movies and theme parks, and that attracts a whole different demographic that
Hmm.
then could graduate into gaming, or maybe that proves to be more successful in the long term. So I'm hopeful, and I think that you have a good perspective. It's just going to be kind of strange to think of Nintendo without um, many of those legacy creators there anymore. And I know that they don't really direct the games or develop the games, but they're so much like the face of the company that I don't. It will be it's hard for me to imagine Nintendo without them. But there will be a whole new generation of people that will just know Mario, and they won't know Miyamoto in the next 20 years. So
Mm.
I think yeah, so I think that there's a good chance for a brighter future. And but it is just kind of, it's a little bittersweet. So I'm looking forward to, I don't want to be overly sentimental, but like I kind of want to treasure this as a last generation, because I'll be like, God, I'll be near 50 by the end of this. So I think that will be it will be nice to try to be positive and really embrace a lot of the experiences for this generation, especially with just a lot of the noise that goes on these days, it seems like.
Yeah. Like it is, just natural for a lot of the people that have been here from the beginning, like the Miyamotos and the Sakurais, to eventually the Kojimas, to eventually just kind of fall back and pass it on to a predecessor, somebody they trust with the series, somebody they've personally been training. Like even with Mr. Iwata, like his thing with Nintendo, he didn't just jump into the position. He's been with the company. He's helped develop a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
games. He was in the rooms with a lot of those creative ideas. So they do a really good job at bringing in that younger generation to help hold the line, essentially. Even when Splatoon was first coming out, they were like, no, we want the younger perspective. We want to see what
Yeah.
are some of the ideas they have that we were just completely not thinking about, and then we want to try to help them get their ideas out there. Then they made one of Nintendo's marquee titles with just one game on the Wii U, of
Mm-hmm.
all things. So I do think it may not get to a point to where we remember individual names, but once we see certain studios, I think that's the pivot going on even right now.
Yeah.
That'll probably be what we start looking at more, as opposed to the main person in charge of these projects.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think that, and I think in some ways that's better, because you can't just rest on one person or a handful of people to like make everything. And I, I think that's a excellent point, and I'm definitely, you know, positive and hopeful that this is going to be a really fun and unique uh, generation.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna be a really fun time. We're all gonna be hyped come April 2nd. I'm taking off work for it. I don't care
Hmm.
what my boss has got to tell me. I already put my PTO in for that day. I can't wait.
Yep, I'm on a holiday today, so that was going to be my plan for tomorrow, was to put it on there.
Okay, do you have any final closing thoughts before we call this the end of episode 5?
No, it's good to be back. Hoping our lives, get a little bit more functional to keep this going. But yeah, if anything, I'm right there with you. April is gonna come, and we're gonna see a lot of things we expect and a lot of surprises. And so it is a good time to be a Nintendo fan. And in the meantime, still going to be playing my Switch and hitting that backlog that I'll never finish. But hey, I can
Absolutely
continue it on
not.
the Switch too. Yeah, absolutely not. But I can continue it on the Switch too, or at least convince myself that I can. So
There
how
you
about
go.
yourself, man?
Um, Pretty much everything you said. Also, I just want to let you know it's always great just talking video games with you. There's not a lot of people I can do this with who don't just give me a complete headache or are always kind of just looking to go back and forth about nonsense and things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So thank you at least for being here and having this great conversation with me. It'll be a really good time once the Switch comes out. Switch 2 comes out, and we can continue the conversation there.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it. Pleasure is all mine.
All right, and with that, everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. We will probably be, I'm sure we'll be back. We'll be back with the Nintendo Direct, giving our thoughts on that when the Switch 2 comes around. There's a rumor that we should be getting a Nintendo Direct for Switch 1 next month. Don't know if we'll be around for that, depending on what they decide to show, but for sure, come April, there'll be another episode. Until then, take care, and thanks for watching.